Hey, Daniel, can you come here for a second?
Yep.
I can't hear them. Don't say anything.
Thousand or more.
I don't care about
7%.
Hey, Lee, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now.
All right, we're not started yet. Just a moment.
Okay, thanks.
Howdy, folks. Good afternoon, and glad to have you with us today as we go into this workshop. It is a budget workshop, and so the first thing on the agenda, and most of it all day, will be handled by Kyle and Ashley as they present their budget. Thank you, folks, for all the work that you have done, and of course, thank all the departments for the work that they have done this spring and working on their individual budgets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll go through a whole gamut of information today. This is a lot of information that we shared with you, and we do hope you find it relevant as we move forward to adopting a budget. This fiscal year certainly will be unlike others as we currently are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, where we've seen some identified revenue losses as well as expenditures from the town. But still overall feel pretty good about it. As you know, the town is growing, which means that our needs are also growing. So we've got to be able to address those needs at the same time as being as conservative with the taxpayer dollar as we can, and trusting in us to spend that money wisely. So with you, in front of you is your agenda. We'll kind of work through this information. I have invited 3 specific departments, police, fire, and utilities, to come in and talk to you today as we kind of work through their budgets. They have pretty large impacts to the town, so felt that that would be beneficial for you. If there's other departments that you want to request to talk to the department head, please let us know at the end of the meeting, and we'll get that scheduled. If you have specific questions for departments and feel it's something that we can get you an answer to adequately supply the information, we'll do that as well. I think we could probably talk about budget every meeting all year to stay in tune, but unfortunately we just sometimes don't have that time. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Lee Grissom. Mr. Grissom is a partner in Preston Douglas and Associates, and is the town's auditing firm. They're under contract through next year, and have prepared the fiscal year 18-19 audit. And on the screen, I have sharing as a report to the mayor and town council, and he'll go over the FY 18-19 audit. So at this time, Lee, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is my first Zoom presentation. So I'll do my best. There's a little bit of feedback. All right. I'll get right into it, pretending that you can hear me perfectly. First off, I'm an audit partner at S. Preston Douglas. Our firm's been around for over 78 years. We have 3 offices in North Carolina, and we audit over 55 governmental audit clients in North Carolina. So I'm going to go over audit definitions, and then we're going to do some highlights for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2019. And then we're going to go over some graphical information last. First off, as far as audit definitions, I know most of you guys know an audit, it's essentially, in layman's terms, we're given an opinion that you can trust the financial statements that are prepared by management. For this particular audit for June 30th, 2019, there were 3 auditor opinions that we had to issue. The first one is your financial statement auditor opinion, which is the one that you're used to receiving. All entities basically receive. It's on the financial information and the footnotes, saying that, you can rely on that information. The second auditor opinion is referred to as a yellow book opinion. That's an opinion on internal controls. What's important about that one, that isn't an opinion on the internal controls overall. It's just during the process of doing our audit, we walk through internal controls kind of as a requirement for what we do. And if we come across any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, we'll point those out in a separate report. Last year, the town actually had 2 internal control findings. They were related to issues with a software conversion, which threw a lot of accounting balances out of whack. So there were a lot of audit adjustments. So we had 2 findings basically related to that last fiscal year. This fiscal year, we had no internal control findings to report. So on the financial statement audit, we issued an unmodified opinion. On the internal control audit opinion, that's the audit opinion number 2, we had no findings. There's a third audit opinion this year related to single audit, and that's the compliance aspect. It's related to the $3.8 million that the town received in U.S. bonds this year, USDA bonds. We had to do some additional compliance work, and we had no findings there as well. So all in all, it was a really good year from an audit standpoint. You'll see the financial statement information next. And is there any questions up in this point? Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, one other thing, as you know, we're talking about June 30th, 2019. That was several months ago. So this year's audit was at least 3 to 4 months late. And I just wanted to point that out. Hurricane Florence was really disruptive in last year's audit. So last year's audit was very, very late. This year's audit, we got started late, so it was late again. So the last 2 fiscal years have been, the report hasn't been issued within the local government commission's contract. So, but for fiscal year 20, we will be back on track now that this audit is now complete. For this fiscal year ended 19 audit, we had no difficulties with management. There were no new accounting policies during the year. We had no disagreements, and again, there were no findings as I discussed previously. So really good from an audit standpoint, a really good year. And as you'll see, I know you guys have some challenges going forward, but this year's financial information for this particular audit was very strong, as you'll see in the graphs as well. So I think the best thing to do, let's go ahead with the graphs because it shows most of the financial highlights. Let's just start looking. There's 12, I think there's 12 graphs. Can you do a fit to page? Yeah. All right, as you'll see in most of these graphs, there's six audited fiscal years, starting with 2014 through the most recent 2019 audited year. And you'll see most of these are trending in the right direction. This is analysis of fund balance for all the governmental funds together combined. So you can see the steady increase over the last 6 fiscal years. And back in 2014, it was only 11.6 million, and now we're looking at around 20.4 million for fiscal year ended June 30th, 19. So we go to the next one. Okay, this is an important metric. You scroll down just a little bit. This is the analysis of unassigned fund balance as a percentage of general fund expenditures. As you can see, in 2014, this metric was at 17.4%, and now we're sitting at 61%. What this represents is the emergency fund. So this is your unassigned general fund balance as a percentage of general fund expenditures. So what this is, 8% represents 1 month of emergency fund. So at 61%, you're looking at approximately, what did I got? Almost 8 months of reserve expenditures. So that's a really good position to be in the general fund for the town. All right, let's go to the next one. And this is just simply cash all funds for the last 6 fiscal years. Again, really strong increase over the last 6 fiscal years. I mean, and from an audit standpoint, it's essentially management's decision and board's decision on what to do with the money. It's not, from an audit standpoint, I like to see, health in the general fund balance and cash position, all this stuff. But, ultimately it's you guys' decision. So from my standpoint, I think it's terrific, these trends. So let's go to the next page. And the next 2 graphs, these are just breakdowns. This is general fund revenue sources by percent. This is just kind of for your information type stuff. And the next page is general fund expenditures. Let's go ahead and just go to the next one. This is a breakdown percentage allocation in the general fund. All right, let's go to the next one. And again, this is your outstanding debt for the town in the last 6 fiscal years. You scroll down just a little bit so I can see the balances at the bottom. But again, the debt in 2014, almost 25 million, and it's slowly, steadily trickling down until fiscal year 19, you're sitting at $16.8 million. We'll stop right here. The compliance audit that I mentioned earlier, this year, the town those bonds at $3.58 million of USDA revenue bonds. Again, that was new in fiscal year 19. So, and those are going to be paid over 30 years at 3.25% interest. Let's go to the next page. And this is back to the general fund. Again, really strong general fund over the last 6 fiscal years. I know we've talked about the general fund already a couple of times, but this is just the fund balance aspect. Let's go to the next page. And again, this is the unassigned fund balance of the general fund. This is kind of related to those percentages I was talking about earlier, but this is the unassigned portion that's not restricted for other uses for the general fund balance. All right, let's go to the next one. And this is property taxes over the last 6 fiscal years. We can't see that one too well. Okay, let's just go to the next one then. And this is property tax collection percentage over the last 6 fiscal years, and this is pretty steady as well. Not too much interesting information here. Let's go to the next one. This is your water and sewer or water and wastewater fund net position. So we've been speaking a lot about the general fund and governmental funds, but this is your proprietary funds here. And again, can you zoom out just a little bit? And the main increase on this particular fiscal year is the impact fees. Let me see if I can find my note on that. Yeah, the impact fees last year were, in the previous fiscal year, were $772,000. For fiscal year 19, it was a pretty big bump to $1.6 million. So that made up a big portion of that increase in this particular fund. So let's go to the next page. This is the Beach Renourishment Fund. You can see since 2014 building up a big balance, and then fiscal year 19 there was $4 million that was spent in that fund. So you can see the dip from 2018 to 2019 in this fund. Is there any questions for me of this financial information?
So you feel like the town's in good financial condition?
I do, and I think the trends definitely show they're moving very positively since 2014. And I know from even last year to this year we had to sort out some accounting software transition issues last year, which they were a headache, and Ashley can attest to that. But this year's audit actually went really smoothly, so there's no complaints, which makes it easier on my part to present to you guys. Any other questions?
I don't think so, Lee. We appreciate your time this afternoon and the work you do for the town, and auditing work. I know it's not exciting stuff, but we're happy to have some good news for sure, and very timely as we enter into our budget discussions. So thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? You should have the full agenda, and then also the full audit that Ashley had passed out in your that bound book right there that the mayor has. So.
If you get a chance to give us some copies of those grants.
Yes.
So we can stick them in this audit. Don't you think that would help?
The PDF we just looked at?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
I will get those. Okay, I'm gonna pull up. This is the presentation that was provided to council at our last meeting. Understand we didn't really get to spend a whole lot of time, but the whole impetus of this presentation was to guide our discussion and still feel it relevant to keep up here to talk about. Because a lot of the documents you have in front of you will correspond with the topics that we'll look at. And I keep Ashley close to me because she's the wizard on a lot of the details on this stuff. So I will call on her probably quite often. I told her to make sure she stays hydrated because I'm sure she'll be talking quite a bit today. So again, we'll just quickly go over some of the major project accomplishments. Being the Sand Hall project, we're all very grateful that project is completed. Upcoming, the J.H. Batts repaving project. Again, this is almost $30,000 lower than what we had budgeted for the bid. So that's good news, and that work will be completed. They're actually doing utility work out there right now, and so happen to be the same contractor that's doing the intersection work, Onzo Pavement and Grading, is also the low bidder on our project. So hopefully we'll make it for a seamless repaving project and intersection improvement. The pipeline project to the new Surf City Elementary and Middle School, and then the various Hurricane Florence recovery projects, most of those being closed out or completed. So again, a lot of this information was presented to you with the audit information. The general fund balance and a reminder, this is as of June 30th of 19, 6.8 million. That equates to 71% of the general fund expenditures. You had the accommodation tax fund. This is on hotel, motel, short-term rental type stuff at 2.2 million. Water and sewer fund at 2.7. A lot of that is made up through water and sewer rates. As well as, is it capital or system development fees that get put into that as well? Or just the?
They go into capital reserve.
Very good, okay. And then the beach nourishment fund that goes up and down as we work with FEMA on our category B reimbursement, which is still looking good. Out of, I think, $14 million project, we hope to get and expect to get somewhere around 12 million of that back. About 12 million of the 14. And then again, trying to apply for that additional grant funding to close that gap a little bit. So, the council approved 2 million just out of the nourishment fund to provide that continuous berm. So hopefully that expenditure will be matched with some grant revenue or close, as close as possible that we can. So very grateful if we are awarded any funds out of that.
12 million, would that go back into beach nourishment fund?
Yep.
You anticipate us getting it this year?
Soon, yes. Well, yeah, it's at a phase, I think, with FEMA that is in that last sort of step. So it's just waiting on them to designate that and get
You
it
used
to
the
us.
word just waiting.
We're just waiting. Yeah, that's right. But, we do have money in that fund because we will have upcoming expenditures directly tied to the federal project that we have to do up front, including land acquisition for parking and access. And we have to improve that parking. So that'll be projects that will come out of that beach nourishment fund. So we'll try to balance that the best that we can. And as I had alluded to, Ashley and I will be working closely together to try to make recommendations on the smartest financial decision for the town to make to avoid interest or compounding interest for paying for phase one of that federal project. So if there's an opportunity for us to reduce our liability, but still have a healthy fund in there just in case, we want to try to do that.
Right. And we did get clarification that the money that we spend now on the property and the improvements and all of that will be applied to our portion of the federal cost of the project.
It'll be offset. So when that final budget and formula is applied, we're on the hook for 35%. The feds are 65. That 35% of the total project then is split between North Topsail Beach and Surf City with an agreed upon percentage at 60-40, where Surf City will bear 60% of that cost.
Right.
Doris, yeah.
And then, okay. And then does the state, where does the state come in on
Well,
that?
that's something we'll still have to keep reminding our legislators that we need an appropriation looking for 50% of that local cost share for the state to hopefully pick up on. And we'll keep trying to work that in. Nothing is being put into the budget right now due to the coronavirus and the short session. So we'll have to continue to work on that topic.
So going into next year, we'll probably have between 22 and $24 million in beach nourishment.
If we get the FEMA dollars. So
Yeah.
right now, that 10 million has been reduced down to about 3 million because of the sand project that we've done. So it's critical that we get that FEMA reimbursement. So it should be about 15, 16-ish going into next year.
Thank you.
Mr. Torres, you had something on that?
I'm going to hold my question
Okay.
to the end in
Okay.
case you touch upon it as
Very
well.
good. Good for it. So with that, we've got a lot of projects that this town, needs to undertake. It's making the decisions as to when. So what helps guide those decisions will be our capital improvement plan, which we'll get into in a little bit. And then identifying projects within that capital improvement plan that we will actually complete within the fiscal year. As a reminder, that capital improvement plan is reviewed every year, even though it's a 5-year document, because things might get thrown out of that plan. We might need to bring something into it. So don't look at that CIP as a end all be all between now and 2026. It's just not how it goes. So the major projects that we anticipate completing and will budget for is the town hall project. We've presented you a breakdown as to the financing and how all the numbers work with that. The town is in need to update its comprehensive plan, something that's overdue, and that's about a $35,000 expenditure. We have a mainland park land acquisition that we're looking towards to expand our parks and recreation offerings as our mainland population continues to grow. A pavement conditioning survey. This is something that will help guide our investments for streets in regards to repairs, resurfacing, et cetera, as opposed to just tackling the most pressing item year over year. We really want to put a plan together. Again, that's off the top of my head, I think was a $25,000 investment for the town. But we should be able to see some of that back in savings where we're doing targeted efforts for road repairs. We've got a fire truck or trucks that need to be purchased for the fire department as we have some end of year service life on some of that equipment. And then our water and sewer projects, which is by no means an order of importance. I think that we can all agree that these are all important projects to do. Well 6 will be another high production well. The additional subaqueous crossing under the Intercoastal Waterway to provide some redundancy, and we have a very old pipe that goes under the Intercoastal. Both the brine and iron disposal at the water treatment plant. We are currently working on the studying and permitting of the brine disposal, which is going to be a discharge potentially. So we will have to get permitting for that. Basically, what we're trying to do is take I don't really want to call it waste, but residual of treating our well water with salt, because it's very hard water. That is currently going to the wastewater treatment plant. So we'd like to divert that waste stream and put salt water into salt water, essentially. But there's some dilution rates that have to be met. That's where a lot of the engineering comes in. There's a model that they use to determine that, and then we'll hopefully have a choice as to location as to where that discharge would be. But again, all the fish and plant studies will be done to make sure that we're not having an impact, and we can get that permit. The iron, similar, but not the exact same. You know, we've been studying the property in which the disc golf course is currently on for the iron disposal. Again, this goes to the wastewater treatment plant. Both the salt and the iron are not really overly good on the mechanics of the wastewater treatment plant. So not only are we reducing the flow that goes to that wastewater treatment plant, but we're also prolonging some mechanical equipment. So again, the wetland delineation was completed. We have concurrence with the Corps. So the next phase of permitting is moving forward for iron disposal at that property. So there is a threat of the disc golf course having to be relocated. However, I think it will be a priority of the town to find another place for that. Is a popular thing for our residents and visitors to do. The additional studying at the Juniper Swamp irrigation in areas P1 through 5. Again, we're just getting the final reports coming out of those. They had hydrologists had to go in, the engineers have to go in, dig wells, test soils, et cetera. So we're starting to get some of our land application rates back in, and we'll want to move forward on those projects. Which includes permitting, additional infrastructure, extending our irrigation lines to be able to spray in those areas that were already identified. And then the headworks upgrade at the wastewater treatment facility. And this includes the band screen. This is basically your number one, your first point of removing debris and items from your wastewater flow. So when people flush rags and other stuff down the toilet, or we get things into our wastewater stream, this is our first capture, and it's a big part of the wastewater treatment plant. Getting into anytime we budget for anything, we have to match our revenues with our expenditures. I think you'll probably hear that quite often as we continue our discussions. These are just some numbers that break this down between general fund, your water and sewer fund, and then your accommodation tax fund. We have to do these projections again for revenue because we don't know exactly what will come in. But one thing that, with the ad valorem taxes that we'll be looking towards is, and I don't think we've gotten final word from the county tax assessor, but there was a lot of reduced values because of the storm damage. So a lot of those values will be coming back online as of January 1, I believe, is when the tax assessor had indicated that. So this 6.4 revenue could potentially be higher, but again, this is something we'll have to keep our eye on. And you don't want to get over budget your revenue, because if we don't meet that, then we have shortfalls. But you can see that the year to date is about 6.3. So Want to keep that conservative. You have your sales tax. Again, we're going to budget a revenue of 1.6. Right now, we're at 1.537. We don't get our sales tax numbers month over month until like 2 months out. So even right now, we have not been able to see what the impacts of our shutdown has been. So we want to keep an eye on that. And of course, as we continue to move towards allowing additional retail options and sales tax coming back into play, we expect to see that number. But as you can see, we budgeted for 1.661 fiscal year to date is at 1.537. And that's probably from the end of February numbers. So we do feel good about our sales tax revenue meeting our budgeted number for that.
So I've got a question. The federal government's fiscal year is October 1. Are we the same?
No, we are July 1 to June 30.
All right, thanks.
So we have to have this adopted by July 1. Yeah, well, technically, yes. These are things, we don't like to mess around with this
So it
too
can
much.
be at 12:01 a.m.
Yeah, absolutely.
Already adopted.
And there's been some legislative updates in regards to the coronavirus, in regards to posting the budget for public inspection. We can do this online. And if we have a meeting where we're not having public hearing or face-to-face public hearing, when we hear those comments, we have to wait 24 hours before we adopt it. Whereas if the town is accustomed to having a public hearing and then adopting the budget that night, we're not going to be able to do that. So we'll have to schedule that accordingly.
I doubt we'll be having a
face-to-face.
face-to-face open public hearing by the end.
Yeah, so we'll do the same thing.
Right.
We'll listen to the comments and then at minimum 24 hours later reconvene to officially adopt the budget. So. Still moving down, building permit and fees. This, I think Ashley's done a good job at being conservative on this. We still don't know what the long-term effects of that would be. And it's still relatively close with our current revenues. And you can see we budgeted $138,000 in revenue last year. We are right at that mark. I suspect since this was published to now, we probably have exceeded that revenue. But you can see last year you exceeded. Well, I don't know what we budgeted for revenue in FY 18-19, but again, we just don't know the impacts. And even though the economy was really good before this, the housing market may be different when we come back. I don't think so. And then solid waste fees, we budgeted that. Ashley, maybe you can hit on as to the year-to-date revenues for the solid waste fees at 962.
Yeah, so, that's collected along with the water and sewer fees. Projection-wise, I think that we will meet, if not exceed, our solid waste budgeted number of the 1.1. So I think we're on track. We will be fine. That is at least a month behind, so we should be on target to meet or exceed. But the increase in the budgeted number for FY 2021, so if you saw years prior to 18 and 19, the average amount is about 1.2 or a little bit more that we collect. So in 1920, I was extremely conservative with that number. So for 2021, it's just bringing that number back up. No fees are changing, no rates are changing for those solid waste fees. It's just being a little less conservative with those numbers, if that makes sense.
Next question is, what is our undesignated fund balance right now?
In general fund,
Yes.
a little over 6 million.
Okay, thank you.
So going into the accommodation tax revenues, again, hotel, motel, et cetera, We had budgeted for 1.2, and good news is that before this even happened, we had exceeded our budgeted revenue amount. So year to date was at 1.263. So we thought we might see a major shortfall. My guess is our biggest shortfall that we're going to see is going to come through sales tax on our lost revenue through this pandemic, as well as water and sewer fees that are coming in. So again, just kind of going into the same scenario, revenue projections, year-to-date fees coming in. Again, this was published probably 2-3 weeks ago. And as updated billing cycles, of course, your year-to-date revenue. But we are looking at some losses in water and sewer. The state has delayed delinquent billing and collection, so we have to delay that. So hopefully we would see that recouped. And then, as I briefly mentioned during our meeting, is that your SDF, which is your system development fee, what others may refer to as impact fees. We cannot technically charge impact. It's a system development fee. This is when a new project comes online and they buy a tap. So that tap is tied to that system development fee, and those revenues are also tied to that. So again, there's an interrelatedness between your system development fees and then your capital improvement projects that expand capacity. So at a certain point, you could expect if we made no investments into expanding our capacities, your system development fees would tail off. So those are directly correlated.
Because we don't know how much, we can't budget.
Then we're just directly into operational costs, and then operational costs being funded through user fees, your water and sewer bill. And then if there's repair projects at our plant, water or wastewater, we have to fund those through that. But again, that's sort of the outline of that. Well, I guess we'll stop talking about the police department then. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Can I ask one question? If
Yes.
you go back to the screen before, on this chart, can you show the year 18-19, what was budget and the year to date on those, just to compare?
Yep.
So you want to see the FY 18-19 budget numbers?
Yeah, just to compare.
Do you want to see it just for water sewer?
I mean, if you can do it for everything, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, we should, never mind. I was gonna say, it might be on this, it would be on the revenue side. No, all we have is 1920.
Yeah.
Now, the 1920 figures that we're looking at now are through what?
July 1.
Through March?
The year to date is probably, I'd say a few weeks ago. Yeah, so early April.
Okay.
It would be our year to date,
Right.
which obviously would be a percentage of your budget number.
Right. So now, in other words, if you're looking at water fees, then we're probably going to be a lot closer to the
Our budget.
1972 than what we're showing now,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, because that would be up through, that probably does not include the March, April, May, and June billings because
Okay,
you bill in arrears.
Okay.
Teresa, I can compile those numbers, but it'll take me just a second. Okay.
And if you want to, email it out to us later. that's
Okay.
fine.
I can get that
asking
together.
That you do it right now.
Yeah, so, as of April, we had collected 130 never mind, excuse me. That number could probably be added into it, but let us get you the real numbers. I don't want to try to wing this.
Yeah,
for
so
you.
water and sewer, year to date, we're at 1,522, and that includes the March billing. So you still have April's, May, and June. So, I mean, it consistently
At
goes
about
up.
150,000 for water.
So I think as far as, because the legislation with COVID-19, the majority of our customers, about 60% plus or minus, are on draft. We're fortunate in that respect. So
Right.
with the legislation with COVID-19 and being able to work with people who can't, afford to pay their utilities, or us not being able to apply penalties, I think even projecting out based on what our normal collections are, I think we will still be okay. We might have a small shortfall if we have a shortfall at all.
And these, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say these shortfalls are what are being tracked. So if the opportunity comes up to work with the state or the federal government, we are going to be right on it to be able to submit those. We won't have to go back and do a bunch of digging and number crunching. It's already being done as we go.
And I know we probably not as big at this as some other places, but if we postpone payments for people, then do they just pay a percentage of it later on per month? Or how do we end up collecting the back payment?
So you have to work with them and provide them an adequate payment plan.
Right.
So up until December, you have to allow them 6 months to pay their
spread that
delinquent
out,
balance.
right.
Yes, between March and June 1.
Right.
So yes, we would just take that total delinquent balance, divide it by 6, and that would be added to their normal bill. So
Without any interest
yeah, it does
on
not zero anything out. It does not relinquish that debt from them. It's just, yes, working with them and giving them a payment plan. Knock on wood, we've not had any thus far.
Oh, is that right? Well, that's what I say. We really are not affected by that as much as a lot of places are.
Yeah, sure. Big
My question is, you listen to the news, they say a lot of cities have between a 20 to a 30% increase in sewage and water usage because people have been home the last couple of months. Have we experienced the same thing?
I would say yes, looking at the billing numbers, I don't know if it's 20 to 30%, but we have seen a slight increase in the billing.
Make up for a little bit, right? And then make it.
Right.
Yeah, but then
Our
you're
biggest-
losing it on rental houses then.
Yeah, and that's, offset. What your point has been offset. Steve provided the April flow rates and there wasn't a drastic reduction in sewer flow,
Good for that.
which is probably taken into account everybody that's at home that's using the daily.
Yeah, they're just making up for who hasn't rented.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll wash itself out in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting into the capital improvement plan, this is the fancy document you have on your table, probably on your right-hand side. This is something that we are going to request council adopt as part of our 5-year plan. And as I had gone over this at your last meeting, this gives a semi-detailed analysis and information on what each of these projects are. These have been broken up into differing topics of interest per se, from parks and recreation to water and sewer, to other enhancements. So you can go through that, but ultimately to really synthesize this down on the very back of your plan, you should have a spreadsheet that breaks it up. It's a separate document that breaks it out between your general fund capital improvement projects and your enterprise fund capital improvement projects. So for each project that we move forward on for this upcoming fiscal year, we will develop an actual capital improvement budget for that project. So You can get all the details you need in here. Just kind of going into, let me find a good project. Inclusive playground at $75,000. It talks about what that is, the new mainland parkland acquisition, 2-year total. It talks about what that is and what grant funds are being applied for. And then there's a 5-year fiscal year expenditure on each one of those items, depending on what we want to take on. Town hall is in there, et cetera. And again, if we adopt this, and we go back next year, there's projects that we might not undertake that might just not rise to the level of importance that we thought they were when we put them in this plan. So we get rid of that. But the capital improvement plan is not I guess I could say it's not a fiscally constrained plan. These are the things that we know the town needs and wants to undertake. It's just where is the funding coming from and at what point are we going to fund it if we do fund that project. So ultimately it's almost $20 million over the next 5 years, that's been put into this. And I would only suspect that number continues to go up. That just shows that the town has needs that we need to fund or that we might want to fund at some time.
I was going to ask, I see the legend there for the different things, but is there has it been prioritized in any way?
Well, so what we have in our basic prioritization comes into your fiscal year 20 and 21 and what would get funded. So that is, let's say in here.
So that is the priority layout, the way you put it across the different fiscal years.
Yeah, the projects. Right, the projects that are shown under the column of FY 2021, all of those projects have been deemed important, and priority to start or complete in the next fiscal year. Right. This document is one that, Kyle had you guys go through the strategic planning workshop with the COG.
Yep.
This is a document that kind of coincides with that. And that's the point in time that you all discuss your vision and where you want the town to be and what those projects consist of, and strategically, how do we get there? And those projects are taken and placed into this document as a working document for budget purposes.
And everything in the first column is included in the budget that we're looking to approve?
If it's not included, some of the things are, for instance, on the screen, like major road repairs, sidewalks and whatnot. Yes, those are included in the budget. If it's not included in the budget, it will have a separate capital project budget. The majority of these will have a separate capital project budget.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So just for example, like we'll say the subaqueous crossing for the water line, when it has its own budget, then it's being drawn down off of that and not just the overall water fund to complete that. Then we can close things out. So transportation element, again, major road repairs, we know things will come up and we need to fund it. This is, we don't have a specific project identified, but we're trying to work towards that with that survey to be completed. New sidewalks and repairs, again, we need to prioritize where those new sidewalks and repairs need to come in. You have a bike and ped plan, and I would highly advise that we do that. There's some smaller projects that are high priority. I know we've talked about these, central town type of thing. And there's an implementation schedule in that plan. So if we adopt this budget at 50,000, then I would think that council needs to come back and say, okay, these are the projects that we want to do. I'd love to be able to deliver that to you right now. I just don't feel like we have the time. But if you know that we have this money set aside for it, we can come back and ask the department head to give us a list of those priorities,
Right, then
and
they can
let's
prioritize
get it done.
according to
Yep.
the amount of
And
money we
then,
got.
and then next year, you know, we might have to take 100,000 out of the major road repair and move it into sidewalk repair, because that might be a higher priority for council.
Right.
As opposed to resurfacing a whole road that might be able to last for another 2 years. We can build a multi-use path. I don't know. These are just some ideas thrown out there. And then if we can offset these expenditures through grants, you know, that's what staff wants to try to do to be able to get that. The Parks and Recreation and Tourism, you know, we've kind of pushed off the fishing pier and gazebo to FY 21-22, but adding the inclusive playground, the Mainland Park, land acquisition, and the skate park, which are all interrelated and all have been or will be applied for grant funding. Not saying there's any guarantee that we will get that, but if we put this in the budget and we don't get the grant, we might only do land acquisition this year. And then we'll have to come back and readjust what that budget looks like. Public safety requests for EM Viper site. This is for communications between us and the county and Topsail Beach in times of emergency. Fire station exhaust capture system, station 23 and 25. There are some grant fundings to offset those expenditures. And then the fire engine replacement project, we have 2 of them. As you can see, we've recommended moving forward with one this year and then one with in fiscal year 22-23. We'll look to Chief Wilson to talk a little bit more detail about that. Facilities and grounds, we've got some needs in here. We've sort of broken this out a little bit. You know, the one that we really won't be messing with is the Surf City Municipal Complex or Town Hall project. That one's kind of set. The enclosed tractor with the sweeper at 55,000. Ashley is looking at some alternatives. Maybe that's something that could be leased to take this off of the capital improvement plan and go through a much less financial impact to the town than owning a piece of equipment. But ultimately, it explains what the need is for. You know, we have issues with removing sand from roads and bringing in heavy equipment. It damages the roads. But then having the enclosure would protect the employee a little bit as debris gets flung up, et cetera. Water and sewer. Again, we've got a lot of needs on here, a lot of good projects. As I mentioned, we're trying to get some fund relief on principal forgiveness through the ASADRA process. Still haven't heard back on any of that, but our recommendation is that we try to move forward with the resources that we have to fund a good majority of these projects in the upcoming years. Yes, sir.
All right, what's the total cost of the complex?
6,260.
I say, so that includes all of it.
Yes.
So then we're looking at funding from FEMA and insurance and all that stuff.
And that's
pay approximately half of this, is that right?
That's kind of broken down. You have your grant funding committed, your 3.3. That's your FEMA dollars and your Golden Leaf Foundation grant dollars that we received.
Okay.
And your fund balance of 238,000, that's the town's portion that we will have to front the cost for that. The 2.6 would be your debt service. That's the remaining outside of your FEMA and Golden Leaf Foundation dollars. And then to offset that debt service would be the sale of the property that the current police department sits on and the property to the left of that.
Where are we with that?
Where are we with
That needs to go on the market.
Putting it up.
I have not been able to move forward on that yet, but
Well,
we
one
will.
thing- Yeah, one thing you got to be careful with that is the sale of the police department. The timing of it has to be just right, or we leave the police department homeless.
But I thought that was broken down into several parcels.
It is. It
Right,
is.
so can't we move on some of the parcels minus the
Probably
police
the
department?
one beside it.
Absolutely.
Or
And-
either
and the
sell
worker
it with the,
contract.
sell it with the,
But no, and they knowing that there's a
Yes.
agreement.
in
Yeah,
other words, a lease
Yeah,
back or
yeah,
something
right.
other like
Yeah.
that.
absolutely.
Those are options.
And we're going to move forward. And again, it will be done. It will be put on the market. That's just something I haven't been able to get to, but we will do it. Our hope is that our revenues exceed what the appraised value was of it, to be able to move forward with offsetting
How did the
this
appraised value come out on
230.
that?
Huh?
How did the appraised value come out?
I think it was at about 3 million.
Yeah,
3.7.
That's what I remember.
3.7 million.
For all of
Oh, for all
Yeah.
of it?
Mhm.
Yep.
yep.
So we'll see. We'll see how all that kind of shakes out. Yes, ma'am.
So at the time that property does sell, those funds will go directly to the debt installment
Right.
Yeah.
of
because-
this
Yep.
facility.
Yep.
It
We
would
won't
just go
continue
down.
financing, we will
Correct.
put all of that toward this,
Mhm.
correct?
Correct.
So we'll have a short-term debt on the books, but would hope to relieve ourselves of that very quickly thereafter.
Right,
So,
okay.
all right. Water and wastewater, I think we'll just go ahead and wait till price and we can talk about these in detail if we need to. Getting into the new positions, something that we had talked about in a workshop was potentially adding a fields and grounds director. As you recall, I presented a org chart on that to take over streets and the actual facilities and parks and maintenance and all that other stuff. And then the GIS technician. It sounds like we'll still need to move forward with a part-time position is what we're recommending to complete some projects. And if we can get some grant funding for specific projects, we will do that. And Price has been working on looking at some of that. So that's with the new positions. There were no other new positions requested. We'll talk about some with police department here in a little bit. But I'll wrap up with this real quick. Capital outlay items, these are typically vehicles and equipment. So we have various vehicles we've kind of cut as far as the manager's recommendation on them. So we can get into those specific, but there's some options too. Again, UTV, for police and fire. We have an option to do lease payments for much cheaper and sort of stretch that cost out to the town. So we get into water and sewer fees. Again, that's something we can talk about specifically with Price when he gets up. We have a breakdown of what our current and proposed rate would be for residential and commercial. This is a breakdown of our beach nourishment fund. Again, we're looking at major federal project coming up and want to make those decisions as we move forward. And then here we're at our budget workshop. And then we'll continue to schedule more as council sees fit. But I can tell you at this point, Ashley has done a bang up job at preparing all of this information. And we feel pretty good about our substantial completion of the budget. If we can focus on minor tweaks and clarifications and things like that, I think we'll be in a good position to move forward and meet our statutory requirements by adopting a budget by the end of June 30. We don't want to stretch this out too long. It's going to make us really nervous. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Shanahan. I've asked Chief to come in, police, fire, and utilities, as these are some of your major departments. He's going to kind of give an overview. He's got his budget book that he prepared for us. And then we'll talk about a couple of things and figure out how we're going to move forward.
Good to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Mr. Brewer, hope you're doing well. If you would turn the back, I got a couple of folders in the back there of your binder there. One talks about the budget message and request reductions and related impacts. The second one is a civilian evidence custodian employee. If you can pull those out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to review that first, and then certainly I'll go into the line items and itemized budget. So I want to open up by saying the current operation conditions of the police department, both staffing and equipment, are in great shape. We're fully staffed, have great equipment, and most importantly, we were able to retain officers for competitive salaries. However, 2 patrol sergeants announced that they will be retiring later this year. And one of those patrol sergeants is actually Art Cuneo. He's been with us 22 years. He's retiring June 1st. And I was recently told that Sergeant Glenn Corney will be retiring in September after 20 years of service with us. So we'll be unfortunately losing 2 in September, sir. One of the patrol sergeants is assigned to the evidence room, and that's Glenn Corney. His responsibility is to collect, package, log in, check out, purge, and destroy evidence. The other sergeant, being Sergeant Cuneo, is assigned to the found property locker. Okay, well, this is all found property that is turned in by citizens and officers. This also needs to be logged, purged, returned, auctioned, and destroyed throughout the year. This will cause significant impacts to our current staffing needs. As the town continues to grow, so do our needs. Last year, we've seen a 10% increase of overall calls for service, 38% increase in criminal incidents reported, and 21% increase in non-criminal calls reported. In addition, the 16% increase in traffic collisions and 40% increase in arrests made. We understand there's needs and wants during the budget process. We're strictly focusing on needs this budget year. So with that said, going down new and additional requests, we are requesting a civilian evidence custodian. While doing some research across the country, tend to be moving towards civilian evidence custodians. This includes Riceville Beach, Sunset Beach, Mount Isle Police Department, just to name a few. The reasons being that civilians are typically paid less than a sworn officer, and the civilian may see it as a career, resulting in an increased sense of ownership and longevity in the position. They may bring training and logistics or administrative skills that benefit the agency. And most importantly, civilian custodians will be assigned to found property intake, annual auctions, and many other responsibilities administrative. Some of those responsibilities, such as we can use it as social media, website management, downloading and preparing digital media for the district attorney's office, which we get often requests from body camera footage, departmental inventory, managing all training documents, uploading into our records management system, and filling in for our administrative assistant when needed. Those are just some of the things that certainly a person in that position can take care of. Currently having a sworn officer as an evidence tech takes much time away from their daily duty responsibilities. On an average shift, our sergeant evidence custodian may spend up to 3 hours per shift managing over 1,500 pieces of evidence. Processing evidence takes time and organization. All evidence must be properly packaged, logged, and filed for future presentation. Also, evidence is released often to both the rightful owner, destroyed, or checked out by officers to bring to court. Lastly, having a sworn officer collecting evidence on the crime scene and logging into evidence room is open for interpretation. Some may see this as a conflict of interest, which is concerning. This is the time to make the change in our thinking, eliminating conflict of interest, downtime spent in the office versus hiring an impartial evidence custodian with many other responsibilities would be a true asset to the department. Currently, our department has 1 full-time civilian. While researching some other coastal agencies of our size, these are the findings on the second page there. You can see Carolina Beach has 28 officers with 2 civilian. Kill Devil Hills, 28 officers with 6 civilians. Negs Head, 23 officers, 2 civilians. Oak Island, 23 full-time civilians, 2. Wrightsville Beach, 24 officers, 2 civilians. And Surf City being 21 officers and 1 civilian. If you look at the evidence custodian employee, I asked Captain Johnson to do a little more detailed research and report on this. And that was essentially just an overview of what I read. After researching, amassing information and ideas on employee civilian evidence custodian, the following was what he found. And again, it appears that the civilian evidence custodian are being utilized increasingly by law enforcement agencies. I discovered that numerous agencies and IACP, which is the International Association of Chiefs of Police, .net, that job descriptions and policies, procedures regarding civilian evidence custodians. So what that is, that's a national database that certainly has policies and so forth. So he was able to retain that and see a lot of those policies. And if it's mentioned, if implemented, the civilian employee will take the job task away from sworn personnel, which gives sworn personnel more time for working out and supervision. The civilian evidence custodian will also appear to negate any conflict of interest on utilizing sworn officers that collects the evidence and the custodian of the evidence. The civilian would be non-partial toward collecting evidence and would have no conflict of interest. So this is just some of the things that he mentioned out and wrote out. If you look down in the bottom portion of that page, it's civilian versus sworn. Every department needs to decide whether a person they assign to the property evidence room is going to be a sworn officer or civilian employee. The decision on whether to use a sworn civilian personnel in the management decision. However, here are some pros and cons to consider. So civilian pros are typically paid less than a sworn officer. Many see the job as a career, resulting in an increased sense of ownership and longevity in the position. It may bring some training and logistical administration skills that benefit the agency. The civilian cons may need training in firearm safety, drug safety, in-house software usage, chain of custody. For sworn personnel is already trained, obviously there's firearm safety, drug safety, and chain of custody. Sworn cons typically higher cost per hour than a civilian. They may only spend a short time in the property evidence room because of promotional opportunities and results in a lack of continuity of ownership. So, I'm not going to get into the jobs and duties and tasks unless you really want me to go through this. Certainly, it's pretty detailed as far as, what was put together here on this. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Before I say that, I know it's National Police Week, so I thank you personally, but I'd like to do that in public to you and to your department, not only for this week, but the job that you do day in and day out. So thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate your
You're
support.
welcome. And my question is, I don't see it here, is the, what is the estimated cost for this additional custodian?
Well, the additional cost, if you look on the top of the page of page 3 on that document, basically page 3, under the jobs and descriptions. So the minimum salary we're looking at is starting at $38,000. That should be in your packet and your.
Is it on this one? Okay.
Yeah. It should be in the one underneath that document to your right, underneath your right hand there.
Oh, I got
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. I didn't see that one.
So it'll be on the 3rd page up on the top. So minimum salary, we suggested would be $38,000 annual. Now I must say, in the big pictures, we started looking at this. The reason being is, we're losing these guys off the street coming in and dealing with the evidence. And at times of 3 or 4 hours a day, they're sitting in there off the street, dealing with evidence processing, getting called in when they're off. When officers got caught, they get a subpoena. I got to get this evidence out. So it really is a tasking job, and we're losing visibility in the workforce out in the street.
It makes sense. Is this part of your budget then for FY 2021?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Chief, do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
As we talk about the amount of time that's dedicated to evidence and property, would the position be, is there enough duties to warrant, I guess, the duties for the position to be in evidence for 8 hours or 40 hours a week, I guess.
Absolutely. And again, I mentioned some other tasks. Let me say, it's just not the evidence locker itself. It's got probably 1,500 pieces of evidence in there. And a lot of that evidence needs to be retained for indefinite and stuff that we purge on a regular basis, where it would be the drop box or officers taking drugs off the street and going to the DCI terminals and doing all that stuff as far as checking the records, disposition of cases when they can destroy evidence. There's a lot of times we're not told when cases are dismissed or whatever it may be. So that's an everyday process of going through that DCI terminal. Found property is another monster. That's something whole separate from the evidence locker. Whereas you got wallets, you got keys, you got cell phones, you got money, you got all sorts of stuff coming in. Bicycles, we got kayaks in there that come in that need to be purged and essentially auctioned. We need to retain it for so long, for 180 days. And then after those 180 days, we have to essentially put it in the paper for auction or somebody to claim, excuse me, and then auction it off. There's a lot of process and a lot of, the funds, all the proceeds go to the school system. And that's one of the things that we have a lot of stuff that needs to be auctioned off. I think it might be a better idea to get an auction company to come in and just give them the stuff, and they do that and just get the proceed and deliver the check. So certainly, is your question, social media, website management, social media. I do all the social media stuff now, with the 9 p.m. routines, and Captain tries to get in there. Him and I kind of juggle it with the traffic accident today, for example. It'd be nicer to have timely information if somebody's working Monday through Friday, where they can be on that, just listening and monitoring calls and getting that stuff out to the public. Downloading and prepared digital media evidence, as I mentioned in the DA's report. When the DA requests or a defense attorney requests body camera footage, that's a long download. Upload. I know Jason probably can declare that. That's a big process to get that system out and get that data out to the departmental inventory we do annually. That's something that they can stay on. Managing all training documents is something that we've got a new software records management system attachment to, where idea was to build a profile for each individual officer. All our training files, or we have a separate 3-ring binder. For mine, for example, being here 27 years, all my training files are in there. So we bought this module for our records management system for all that stuff to be uploaded and set basically a profile of me in the computer system and all the staffing to eliminate the paper and have it actually in the database where it should be. Obviously filling it for administrative assistant vacations, lunchtimes and stuff. These are so many things just that I jotted down the last couple of weeks, but there's certainly so many other things that this individual can do.
You feel comfortable that this position would not just be 3 hours in evidence locker a day and be done, kind of.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
A follow-up is, when was the last time that you added someone to the department?
Last time we added somebody.
The only reason I ask is obviously there's an increase. You pointed out all the percentage increases in the beginning of your opening remarks. I just think that if there's been so much growth and we've talked about that, then it's obviously maybe overdue for, someone else. And then if you compare it to the other municipalities around us, they have a much larger footprint. So maybe it's overdue and good use of this hire.
Along that same line, is there a recommended or suggested ratio between police officers and population?
There you go.
There is, but it's challenging for us because it's really hard to put that full-time ratio. If people really look at it, and a good example is this, we get phone calls at times where people say, geez, I'm thinking about moving to Surf City, but the crime rate is just outrageous. How is the crime rate so high? Well, it's hard to look at the influx of the summertime. So technically, if you really looked at a 3,000 population in the department, in the western part of the state, they would have probably, 6 or 7, 8 officers or 10 officers. Whereas we being the influx of almost becoming a year round and being essentially a metro, Wilmington, Jacksonville area, it's really hard to put a number on that. I could say, looking at Wrightsville Beach, for example, we certainly were bigger than Wrightsville Beach as far as beach-wise. and land-wise.
And Carolina.
You know, we got the mainland where Wrightsville Beach essentially is locked to the island itself. But that is a good question. It's hard to really determine what is the right
So
number.
there is no national or state.
Yeah, there is a number.
Well, there probably is, I would think, for like fixed cities,
Absolutely.
to your point.
Right.
But we're in a unique position where we're growing, you know, in the summertime and going smaller population-wise in the off-season. But we should be prepared, I would imagine, for the worst-case scenario, right? I would think.
I would think, but in the summertime, do we not get help? Do we not have part-time help coming in?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, well, I only have, I have James Horn is a sworn part-time officer with us, non-paid reserve officer. And I have.
I thought we had around 4 people coming in.
No, I have Jeff Caldwell. He's a Homeland Security officer full-time. And he does come in from time to time in the summertime. And that's another challenging itself because they got in-service training requirements. It's hard to get. It's not like it used to be years ago. When I first started as a reserve, there were 6 or 8 of us.
I don't have any problem with what you've presented. I'm just trying to get a ratio thing.
Yeah, sure.
Because with our officers right now, we're basically at 150 residents per officer. That's why I was asking what the ratio, what the suggested
Sure, both
ratio is.
sides. It's definitely, again, I don't know off the top of my head. I could certainly,
Well, I think it's,
I can let you know.
I mean, we talked about this on Friday, of looking at adding additional officers, patrol officers to the force. You know, I think that Chief certainly does a good job with what he has, but we do understand that the town is growing and the demands of the town are growing with that. You know, we've talked about special events, but and summertime, but these things are going year round, certainly as we do Christmas tree lighting and other events that continue to grow. And we want to market that as we have professional staff that are marketing these events. So that is one thing that we did talk about Friday with lieutenants and the chief and Ashley and I is, you know, how can we try to accommodate that? And then looking at this year over year and maybe we can have a, you know, surf city ratio if it's difficult to look at amongst a national average, and we're going to have to do it on our own and keep up with it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the national average right now, so it's broken down by jurisdiction populations, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think we would probably fall in between the 25,000 to 50,000 if we wanted to pick one. And that's the smallest ratio that they provide nationally. That's 21 officers per 10,000, per 10,000.
Yeah.
Didn't you have some,
And then they've had bigger cities and different ratios, but the recommended is 21 per 10.
didn't we have some people come in and ride the beach and stuff this past year?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we do have we do have the interns starting on Thursday. this
Right.
week. Yeah, they're starting on Thursday this week.
And you got 4
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Let me clarify the reason I was asking the question, Ron. We, over the years, we've had problems retaining officers. You know that.
Sure.
Because they could get a better salary
Yes, sir.
someplace else, and we were losing officers. We've kind of changed that trend a little bit
Yes,
now.
sir.
So we're offering competitive salaries with our existing neighbors and stuff. And I want to maintain our level that we have or improve on it. I don't want to do catch up. And the reason for my question was basically to find out how much research you've done on the ratio and what we added to. Because we got roughly 3,100 people here as full-time during the year. We increased to about 30,000 to 34,000 on the weekends in summer. So I was trying to see what that ratio was and see what you need. I don't have any problem with your request.
Sure.
It was just I wanted to be able to justify it. I want to be able for us to continue to maintain the officers we've got and the ability that our police department has. Because y'all done a masterful job with what you've got. I have no problem with it. You lead the department very well, and I'm thankful for that. That was the reason for my questions.
Sure.
To throw these things out.
Understand, yeah.
Yeah, I want to take that too also. One of the things that I think that we got echoed, reports is completely echoed is you know, of those 21 officers, how many of those officers are actually on patrol is a good question.
Yeah.
Right?
At any one time.
At any one time. I think, I don't know what's on shift, 3 a shift.
Yeah, normally 3 hours, that's correct.
And that is that's a tough swallow from 9th Street to Dogwood Lakes. A tough swallow. A sergeant and 2 officers. And so, no matter how you flip it, it's a tough swallow. There's no doubt about it. So when you sit, and I think, like Councilman Fowler said here, I think you've done a great job with what you had, but I feel we're playing a little bit of catch up because we have 3 times the square miles that Wrightsville has and 2 times than what Carolina Beach has. And they're doing more with more officers. So I'm just wanting to make sure, I want to hear what is the statistics. You know, we are not, I mean, I think you said this to me first, you elected me, you said, this is not a seasonal community much anymore. We're a year-round town. And so, and we all have seen that for our own businesses and being here for years. And so I want to make sure that we are where we need to be with the officers that we need. You know, if you have 3 on a shift, my question, I'm just curious is, if one goes to Virgo and one gets sick, what do we do? How do you cover from 9th Street to Dogwood Lakes to Topsail to theirs? That's my question that I have on all this, because that's what, you know, so you're asking for this sworn on, which, you know, if you want somebody, you're going to sell someone more than them, and that's great. You know the business, but I want to make sure also. I'm looking at some hours here to achieve. I want to make sure. So if, I know she said here, I'm sorry guys for taking some time. I wrote some questions.
Oh, yeah, this is why we scheduled an hour for each one of these fine individuals.
Yeah, she said that Sergeant Forty was spending 3 hours, maybe 4 hours per shift.
That's
working on evidence.
That's correct.
And he works 4 days a week or 5 days a week?
He works 5 days one week and then 2 days following. That's right.
2 days the following. So that would equivalent to about 12 to 15 hours a week. That we work on evidence. So I'm not questioning you at all, because you know the heart of the police department. But we also have a 38% increase, 6 in criminal and 16 in traffic, 40% in residents, 21% in non-criminal, 10% increase overall. And here it says we have a 40% increase in population, 25% residents. Is this the solution, the only solution we have is the question for all of this? Because it seems, in my thing is, if you want this guy, would it not behoove us to give you that guy, but he should also be sworn so you could use him if you need him somewhere else in an emergency? Because we sounds like we're growing at the seams here, but we're playing catch up, is the question. So if you could help us on that would be fantastic.
Well, and I think, you know, we would be prepared to accept additional patrol officers. What our tough task is going to be is how we're going to pay for that.
Right.
You know, we talk about the revenues versus the expenditures. So we're going to have to, we have to cut something in order to make that happen. And we'll find, I mean, we would have to find it.
So we spend everything we take in? That's what I'm hearing?
Yeah, basically, yes. That's our balanced budget.
We hope to have a little excess at the end left over.
Yeah.
You have to balance that budget, yeah.
Yeah, and the fund balance is where we really have to be healthy, because as all of you know, when something happens, we have to pay for that out of pocket. Yes, we may or may not get reimbursed. Most of the time we probably do if it's a federal disaster, but that expenditure has to come from our pocket. So if we sit at minimum general fund reserves, then we can't go and fix that road, or we can't go and fix that park if it's been destroyed or damaged in a hurricane or some other type of event. So not saying that you know, what I think the town has done over the last 3 years has built up your general fund, and we want to try and maintain that the best that we can. Now there's going to be needs, and we know there's going to be needs. We get to sit here as the bad guys and tell you, we're going to have to find somewhere where this money comes from. And we will do that. But just want to put that out there for you, as we look at overcoming shortfalls in water and sewer, we're going to be looking at rate increases. So there's going to be a give and take on these things.
That's why I went to did we include that in FY 2021 budget? He said yes, so we're able to afford his recommendation.
Through the
Based on the
evidence
The
tech
evidence custodian, yes.
custodian, but if we're going to add patrol officers, we got to go back and figure out where
To
that's going to
Jeremy's
come
point, if he
from.
can be both.
Sure, I think, sure, I think that's what I'm hearing is direction from council. And what we'll tell you is that we'll make it happen somehow, but we're going to be upfront with you in that the way that we make it happen is that there's probably going to be a cut from somewhere else.
Well,
What's the difference in cost of that police officer to civilian?
Well, essentially, you gotta look at, I think it's $1,000, it's 39 for a green officer, but you start talking about retirement, you start talking about all the other
Benefits.
benefits that come about. It's
Yeah.
more than a civilian would be.
okay, so how much is it a year for an officer?
39,000, sir.
39,000.
Let's take 40.
Well, if you want to include benefit cost in that, it's about 56.
Yeah.
Huh?
Benefits.
You've got to include the benefit cost.
Okay,
So it's about
56.
56.
okay, so what would be if we hire,
Insurance for that. See, you're going to have some of those benefits for him additionally, correct, Ashley?
Absolutely.
okay, so if we hire the evidence guy at 38 instead of 40, what would be his package?
It's going to be about the same. The only difference is going to be your retirement percentage, which is about a % difference from local government general employees to local government law enforcement. But insurance and taxes, that's the same, whether it's sworn or not.
Right, so. in
So
other
you're
words, So
looking-
we're talking about, all right, we're talking about 56,000, so how much would we say for evidence guy?
55, difference of
About
1,000.
$1,000.
Yeah.
Right.
But then you do have your upfront expenditures for equipping that sworn officer, ballistic vest,
Yeah, we can do so
uniforms.
much more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 50, yeah.
And, I mean,
Firearms.
honestly, every time we go to do anything, of course, Voorhees is the one that has to do the scheduling.
Not enough resources is what we hear, not enough
And I mean,
resources.
he looks like he is in anguish or something because he just doesn't have enough people to do it. And I mean, I understand that,
Yeah.
but,
No, I think consensus of council is let's try to move forward with and get as many sworn officers patrol as we can.
yeah. If we can do-
All we're saying is that we've got to figure out where the money's going to come from.
Well, what
We
I'm
will
saying
find
is, I mean, I don't know that we got to do it all at one time,
Sure.
but, in other words, sort of like anything else, you look at some this year, some next year, and then maybe some the next, but you're gonna have to, by the numbers that he put out, he's gonna have to build his thing up, and we're not getting any smaller.
No.
Your population is growing all the time. So your responsibility is growing all the time. And I say you're doing a great job with what you've got. And, of course, I do think you're losing, a couple of good soldiers there. But, hopefully we can get some soldiers back in that can do the same thing.
Yeah.
Or Marines, either one, I'm sorry.
Well, I think it's.
My wife gets on me all the time about saving soldiers. They don't use that word around here, but.
Doug, real quick, Doug, I don't think that any of us here saying here, we don't think that the chief should not ask for evidence.
No, I know that.
I think we're all saying is that there's no way I can sit here of good mind and sound and get an administrative guy to work in the police department that can't help assist for other things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
is that
know
right?
what kind of help he needs, but he needs,
Amen.
he's gonna need some more help as he goes down the road, because it's just, we're growing. That's just,
Well, we'll look at a couple of scenarios.
of course, hopefully by grilling, we will be taking in some more money too.
Yeah, we need to spray some wastewater, right?
Right.
Well, we'll put together a couple of scenarios and get you some numbers on it. We looked at this very preliminarily last week, and there's quite a bit of cost with it, but that's okay. And if we can have we can't bind future councils with new personnel, because we come back next year and we say, no, we're not going to fund one. So we want to keep mind of that, and we'll just have to bring it back to you.
Ron, would you not, in the long run, you're gonna be better off with a civilian employee right now, for the simple reason, when you lose Cuneo and your other sergeants, you're gonna have to hire 2 people, because you're gonna have to mow up, and you're gonna hire 2 new people at 38 or 39,000. And right now, that person would be totally in charge of evidence, and he or she would be doing administrative work that takes it off of you, that you're having to do now, that you won't have to train another sergeant to go do the evidence that if you lose Cuneo and the other one, you're going to have to train somebody to do that, where you wouldn't be doing nothing but training a civilian to go in there doing that job and doing administrative duties, doing what you're having to do as far as dealing with the news media in certain instances and everything else. You would be better off with a civilian employee.
Well, that's why I was asking for a civilian employee.
Right.
I was asking for a civilian
Right, I
employee. 'Cause
understand why you was asking.
It's going to be a big transition, as we move into this new police department.
Yeah, and it's going to be
a big transition.
it's going to be
into the evidence.
it's going to be easier for your patrol officer. What is it? 3? The highest one is 3 or 2.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Your patrol officers are 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, MPO, yeah.
And when you promote one of those to a line sergeant, then you don't have to train him to do the evidence like you would if you already had a civilian employee. You could get him or her in here and train them, and sergeants wouldn't have to do anything but deal with supervision. And it would be an asset to you.
That's correct. And again, that's why I didn't necessarily ask for a sworn police officer for this position.
Right,
There's a lot of other administrative duties.
Right now, we could hold off on all new officers, because you're going to get 2 new ones to replace the 2 you're losing. But if we could hold off on that until next year, this civilian employee would help you more than 2 more officers, because you're going to turn around and they're going to be in a training. Even a new officer, if he's straight out of the academy, he's got what, 12 weeks or?
Yeah, 14.
I love you, but 2 sergeants retiring and replacing those 2 sergeants doesn't increase our police force.
I understand
We're in the
that.
same mess
I
we're in.
understand that, but
We're in the same
the
mess.
civilian employee will do the chief and the department more good than 2 more officers right now in the long run.
Okay.
This year.
We're just replacing the 2 sergeants when they come about, right?
Right.
That's correct. Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Yes, sir.
We're just talking adding one more.
We're just going up the rank, right?
Teresa.
Thanks.
Why don't we just hire more dogs? That would be the cheapest way to go.
Mr. Mayor,
They ain't cheap either.
They're like 30,000 or more.
I just wanted to clarify the number. So Right now, you have 21 full-time officers, sworn officers. How many part-time officers do you have?
Two.
Two part-time.
Two part-time, meaning reserve officers, meaning they're only required to come in 8 hours a month. And one's James Horn, held his certification, and one is Jeff Caldwell, who's a Homeland Security officer.
What about the SRO officer? Is that one of your
Yeah, that's included in
officers?
21, yes.
That's one of your full-time officers?
Correct. That's correct.
So like right now with school being out, what, is he full-time at the police department?
No, he's full-time at the police department, in charge of the beach patrols, and with the internship, that's the last year. And that was actually the last position we had. It was this SRO position
And that
to
too,
offset that.
and thank you for reminding me, a good question.
That is a good question.
Councilwoman, is that we've talked about this is next year, we'd like to reel that back from the town funding this SRO. It's a county expenditure that we just didn't feel it being appropriate this year to release that on them, especially with the ABC revenue that's been withheld from us. So
But the whole deal was supposed to be, we put one and they put one.
yeah, so we will revisit that for next budget year, but that brings another officer hopefully back to us next year.
Kyle, I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
This isn't, maybe if Kyle can't answer it, maybe Doug and Buddy can answer it for me. Honestly, because you guys would know this. So my personality is, okay, so what would be inappropriate about making the county pony up right away? I'm just curious, what feelings do I have for them when about my municipality here?
Just the only thing I would say is that we're midway through May.
Okay.
And a budget process would be very difficult for us. I know it'd be difficult for us to absorb if somebody kind of.
But if you put the pressure on them over that, we've only been asking for six months.
Absolutely.
What is their answer?
There's only there's two different answers. They're going to say, oh, come on, we need to do this. But then the other thing is, well, it's our obligation to fund that SRO. So they would have to do it.
Okay.
So
do you see where I'm coming from?
Absolutely. But I think we start those discussions after our budget is adopted and we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I want the kids to have some protection out there, one way or the other. Which I do feel it's the responsibility of, the county, really.
Well, and we talked to Chief Hawk at the town of Erdahl. They don't fund the SRO at the Erdahl Middle School. It's the county.
No.
So again, it's something that certainly needs to be on the table. Other things is this working with the clerk on the magistrate issue. That's got to be resolved. I think we're in the 21st century, I hope. And, if anything, we've quickly realized that business can be conducted with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's I think a couple of strategic things that we can look at to bring additional resources back to the police department. So maybe there's an incremental plan that we present for the next 2 years to sort of bring that up. But another thing that I do stress is, and it was brought up already, is that we're not going to be stopping after 2 years. This is going to be an ongoing need for not just police, but for fire, for utilities, for all town staff. Unfortunately, when population increases, we have to increase to provide a level of service. We want to do that as economically conservative as we can, but there's things we just can't get around. So we'll put our heads together and present something back to you. I think we understand the desire and to make sure that we're protected. And I think the chief has certainly done a good job, and he gets more and more demands. So we'll try to accommodate those demands. And
I think if you contact Sheriff Butler, and advise him that he needs to step up to the plate and provide an officer up here before the budget thing comes, now that he could he should be able to funnel that expense in his budget.
Sure. And we'll get the party started that way, and we can certainly.
Because that'll bring another, if we don't have to put them out there, that'll bring another officer here.
Absolutely.
I think from the educational standpoint and being involved in education for all those years, Dr. Hill has a big part to play in this, according to the state guidelines, as I remember. The school system requests SROs for the schools that they have in their jurisdiction. Our municipality does not have a school. We don't own a school.
We don't own a school.
Right. So that comes through Dr. Hill when he requests from the county in his budget for an SRO. You need to get a hold of him, let him know what's going on, so he can then send it to the county commissioners to fund, and the county commissioners and the search department will then add on or take away whatever they need. But that's the process that it goes, because we don't own a school building. We don't own the school ground. If we did, then it's our responsibility. Not being our responsibility as a municipality, it falls on the county and Dr. Hill and his school system.
You're right, but then one thing you got to think about is, of course, I don't know, how much are they giving us now for beach nourishment?
Who, the county?
County.
About $160,000.
How about
$160,000.
150?
160.
160?
Mm-hmm.
So we're spending almost that much.
Yeah.
So they can't, even if they cut us that, then they still haven't. I was just looking at it saying, well, they could cut something out if they,
Yeah, they could reduce it to 100, but again, we will get the discussion started.
Right.
And see where it goes. I just wouldn't rely on it this year, unless we do just completely say, okay, we're done with it.
But even if they were to give us a full-time officer and a full-time magistrate over here, and we're not responsible for their insurances and their pension,
Yeah.
it would kind of balance out the $160,000.
That's true, yeah. Especially if they give us a magistrate.
So would they do
We
that?
could save a lot of money.
They cut it out. Why would they cut that out?
That would almost,
It's going to pay for the magistrate.
that would put another guy on the roads.
That was cut out whenever Miss Helms, being a magistrate, that's been cut out since, that was cut out when I was a highway patrolman. We had to take everything over there, and it wasn't good then, and it's not safe.
Didn't we have one that burned off for just a little while? I mean, enhanced it for a little while. Somebody lived in
Miss Howard.
Yeah, Miss
Miss
Howard.
Howard, but she retired in '99. But it's been a long time ago.
They're giving us a magistrate.
I'm still working when that happened. We've been without a magistrate for a while. No, 20 years, 15.
Yeah, and
that's wrong, period.
Yeah.
Well, we'll certainly work on that. We said, Mr. Brewer and I, we sparked this conversation some time ago, and it's certainly something that we're gonna push.
Yeah.
We had made some progress on, as far as, you mentioned, Zooming, taking warrants out on people and so forth. We do that at the office now. We implemented that. We've got that from Charlotte Mecklenburg. Captain Johnson did that a couple of years ago. Instead of driving all the way to Bergen to get a warrant on an individual, we were able to do is Skype it to the magistrate's office. And we just got to get over that hump to say, okay, if we got a person that needs to post a bond, we have some type of credit card transition that where they can release themselves on a, so we need to definitely going to entertain that when we're talking about that.
Yeah, because what percentage of the ones you take to jail bond out?
There's people on many times, we get people on bonds $200, $300, $400. They're dropping them off and they're jumping in their car.
That's what I'm
right
saying.
back.
Sometimes they beat you back to town.
That's it. Yeah, essentially you
Before
got.
they can get the paperwork filled out.
That's right. That's a 2-hour turnover time, fuel, wear and tear. It's,
Yeah.
And general risk,
yeah, what I'm gonna do is, I don't know if you just want to go to each individual line item or you just want to hit the highlights of what I'm requesting.
Yeah, hit the highlights.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So if we just go down to If you scroll towards the back of the book under capital outlay vehicle, it's a yellow tab. It should be second from last and towards the back of the book itself.
Contract service.
Capital outlay vehicle.
Be your third to last.
Oh, that's way back.
Way in the back. So essentially, there's a comprehensive plan. Our fleet manager, Lieutenant Voorhees, took this over and put this document together, and it's pretty comprehensive. Really spells it out. So essentially, this year we were asking for 3 vehicles. The manager's recommendation was 2 vehicles. Traditionally, and I'll let Ashley chime in on this a little bit. So traditionally, what we've done in the past, being in current fiscal year, if we're still in the black and we have funding that we budgeted for but didn't necessarily spend it, or what it may be, we were able to offset and purchase a vehicle in our current fiscal year to offset the cost in the going forward year, which has been traditionally done the last few years, and it's worked out well for us. As far as the detail of this whole comprehensive plan that Lieutenant Voorhees put together. So what we're doing is we're essentially asking for 3 vehicles. Again, the manager's recommended was 2, and potentially get one out of this current fiscal year to put us in track on what's going on with this plan. We're looking to decommission 4 vehicles, surplusing car 6, car 13, car 14, car 15. We're looking to surplus all those vehicles. Essentially, it's almost like a lot of moving parts in here. So when we surplus vehicles, usually those vehicles are a couple of vehicles are pool cars, what we call pool cars, meaning we usually have 2 stationary vehicles that are ready to deploy when a vehicle's in service or a vehicle goes down or wherever it may be. So certainly if a vehicle is down, we need something to replace that temporarily to go down. So we usually keep 2 of those pool cars over at Station 2 ready for deployment for any other major repairs or whatever it may be. So everything just slides down the chain. So we're decommissioning, we're looking to decommission 4 vehicles this year, this coming budget year. And 4, that's correct, sir.
What is the other one?
If you look at the numbers, car 6, we'll be surplusing that one. That's 2013 Ford Interceptor. 2009, number 13 is a Ford Crown Victoria.
Got that.
Number 14 is a 2013 Ford Interceptor, and then the 2009 Mr. Beaver's vehicle being the car 15, which is another Crown Victoria. Essentially, it's not necessarily the mileage. At times we look at these things and decommission them. Some of them are higher mileage that we're keeping in the pool cars, because a lot of times what happens is, we may have a car that has 80, 90,000 miles on it, but we drop it, it's a money pit. It's constantly dropping money in it, whether it be a transmission issue or air conditioning compressor issues, and it almost seems like a repetitive thing. So, when we pay attention looking at these, the mileage of the vehicle doesn't necessarily reflect on when we decommission vehicles. And we certainly talked to Mr. Brewer about, possibly using, as we did last year, we took one of our cars and decommissioned it over at Town Hall. It was a 2013 Ford Taurus that's over there, Interceptor, and it's being widely used and seems to be okay. Getting back and forth to post office and just running stuff around town. And, I think it's been beneficial to them instead of taking
When
their
I got my
personal.
tour of town, somebody had to bang the dashboard a little bit for us to get some tachometer going.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
But so that's how the flow system works on this thing. And then if you go back in a couple pages, if you turn to page 6, we're going back, page 7.
Chief, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is there an average of vehicles? Because I don't know the historical data, being my first year here, but on average, are you replacing 2 vehicles? Is there a plan?
Yeah. So if you look in this, sir, there's a plan right in here.
Okay.
It talks about every year, vehicle plan, replacement, 2018, 19, 20. This plan that goes all the way to 2024.
Okay.
So it's projected years of vehicle replacement. Vehicle replacement this year again is for 3 vehicles, and the years forward, 21 to 24 are 2 vehicle replacements.
2 each. How many did you do last year? Do you know?
We did actually, last year, we did 3 last year.
Okay.
But we had 2 in this current budget because we were able to go back historically, traditionally like we did, and we were able to take one out of the 18 budget. So we pulled one from the 18 budget because we had monies left over. So we said, buy one now in the 18 budget. We wanted 3 in 19, but we only allotted 2 because we bought that one in 18. So traditionally, it's been going back. We had money where we balanced the budget. We were still in black. We bought that vehicle and we did that year.
Okay.
Just to offset that pull.
Thank you.
Chief, tough question. I hate to just throw it on you, but with the identified replacement vehicles, with the probably the Interceptors as opposed to the Crown Vics, could those potentially be used one more year if a new officer is funded instead of purchasing new? I know it puts you back in the vehicle replacement, but
it does. It offsets that, but certainly we can look at that, look at the pool call.
okay.
Can we, if we did have another officer, can we pull instead of 2 pool calls, pull it down to 1?
Right.
That would strap us a little bit. Well, we certainly, we'd look at the better vehicle. Obviously, we got accurate records and documents. We'd have to really measure it out.
If these positions, again, this is just for my knowledge, if these are new officers coming out of the academy, do they spend a certain amount of time riding with their senior?
Yes.
So where they might not need a vehicle immediately for.
Yes, 14 weeks, and plus probationary. You don't get a vehicle in probationary period.
Okay.
So it really comes out to be over a year.
Okay.
By the time the vehicle's assigned to an individual.
So we'll have to really look at all of that and put it to be able to provide counsel an accurate picture as to really what that would be. I mean, I think it's easy to say, okay, well, if we have 4 new people, we have 4 new cars, but it's really not that big of an impact, I guess, if you have a lag time for somebody that actually gets a vehicle.
Correct.
And if we can use some of the pool cars. So there might be, we might be able to break Ashley down a little bit and get you the vehicle as part of your plan, but in turn, we would try to utilize the retired vehicles for that.
We should just shut this off right now. You said break Ashley down. It's not going to happen. Seriously.
There's what?
She said break Ashley down. That's not.
Well, that left hand is injured, so we have some advantage right now. So,
I certainly would love to do this. I know you're buying time. I mean, it's very comprehensive. I've mentioned numerous times.
Yeah.
Very detailed.
Yeah.
There's no agency around anywhere that has.
I'd love to see the entire town on a plan this detailed.
I had to read it many times the last couple of years, just absorbing Lieutenant Voorhees' plan here, and it's really it's good. It's squared up. It's a really good plan.
It is a good plan. It's something we've asked for, 10 years ago, Doug?
Yeah.
You're right.
And put it and get it started so we can not have a big outlay at any one time.
Yeah, well, we finally got it. Yeah.
That's right. Requested, and with the way you've got it scheduled, it to do, just work with the manager on trying to get things worked out.
Absolutely. I sure will. So any more questions on the vehicle?
No, thank you.
So, I just got one more thing I just had to add in short. That's in the line item is capital outlay equipment, which I should have put her on equipment, but Cater is 9 years old, police dog, as of April. And unfortunately, speaking with Eric, even if it's going after this cancer issue that the dog had some time ago, he kind of hinted to me the dog's slowing down. 9 years is a long time for a dog to be running canine. So with that said, I did put in for a canine. Obviously, when we retired Cater, Cater's been with us since 2012, 225 deployments, 51 canine demos in public schools and in the public, 34 canine tracks include fleeing criminals and lost persons. He had 2 confirmed saves. She's had over her career for 2 subjects that were lost in woods and incapacitated. 10 article evidence searches, 130 narcotic sniffs, and over $50,000 in and street value and narcotics taken. You know, the dog has done fantastic. As everybody knows, that dog has been a blessing to us, to the schools, to the children, to the community. But I think she's getting tired. She's getting tired, and she's definitely seen slowing down. So I did request a K9 in there. It's $10,000. Certainly the dog is be sent off to training. It'd be probably a year before it's deployed. The training, because when it goes off to training, Eric's got to follow up behind a few months thereafter and train with the dog. But certainly, you know, we'll hang on to Cater until that dog is deployed, that new dog, if it's granted. You know, it's been a true benefit to us, to our community. So I think, for all consideration, that's something I'd really like to hang on to. That dogs are great. But that said, that's essentially what I have. Those are three essentially ticket items. Everything else, budget-wise, I think it looks good.
Thank you, Chief. Question,
Good strategy ending with purse strings on it.
Always bring the dog last.
Peterson getting, I've heard through the grapevine, or I don't know what kind of vine it was, but some kind of vine, that Peterson would be getting promoted to. Is that going to is that going to bother the K9 part in it?
No, absolutely not. You know, and you're right about that. Promotional. I did sit down and talk with him collectively, my administrative staff. Eric's been here for some. He's a senior officer, squared away, great officer, good knowledge, good skills. No. I told him at K9 because that's his heart. I mean, it's K9, so I wouldn't disrupt any services of his K9. He could supervise, and he feels confident that he supervises and deploys K9 when needed. That wouldn't interfere with any type.
Yeah, I mean, he does a good job with that. But I'm going to tell you something else too, and I'm going to ask you. I know that Bailey is doing the beach patrols, handling them.
Yes, sir.
But I tell you what, if Peterson could help with training the ones riding the beach.
He's good.
I swear he's good. I mean.
Yeah, Eric's got more time than Bailey.
He has got an eye. He can see.
And that comes with time and experience and knowledge. You know, Eric he's a great employee.
He is
just a good worker. And,
yes, sir.
And so is Bailey. They're both great employees.
Yeah, I mean, they're all good, but he's just got
you get some better than others. Right?
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Does anybody have any other questions? Good. If you have anything, it's good reading. If you want to get in that thing, in that book, and if you have any questions, please feel free to call. Let me know.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chief.
You guys want a couple minutes before fire comes in? Yeah.
So thank you. I appreciate you letting me come out. You do have my budget book in front of you as well. There's a couple sections in there. Okay, there's a couple sections in there. The department budget message is right there in the front. You know, the town has been very generous to the fire department as of late. We are in a pretty good position as far as staffing and equipment. However, you know, we are seeing growth just like everywhere else. So, you know, there's going to come a time when, you know, we're going to be in a situation to really need to increase the fire department's stature, if you will. We a little bit different than any other department. Most of our general line item expenditures are regulated somewhat through some type of regulation, whether it's through the NFPA or whether it's through the North Carolina State Fire Marshal's Office. So we're guided a lot of what we do on a daily basis. But one of the things that we're seeing, you know, that obviously has an impact on us financially is, you know, we are seeing an increase in emergency responses. Last year leveled off a little bit. We saw a 13% increase last year from 2018 to 2019, but we saw a 46% increase from 2 years prior. So it just shows you how we're really increasing. Another big area of focus for us for the past really 5 years, it started really before I came here to Surf City 3 years ago, was our inspections program through our fire code enforcement. And this past year, our fire code enforcement issued 800 violations, which doesn't sound like a whole lot. And it's not our goal to issue fire code violations. However, the 800 violations is a 37% decrease from the year before. And it's a 73% decrease from 2 years ago. So it just shows you that, you know, being out in the buildings with our inspectors, having a dedicated fire marshal out every day doing our fire code enforcement is actually, you know, paying dividends, and it's actually, you know, making our buildings safer. So some of the areas that we are looking at for this year, obviously, you've talked a lot about fire apparatus. We'll get to that in a minute. One of our biggest challenges that we see is our retention of firefighters. Retention is a big deal for us. Over the past year, we've lost 12 firefighters. Over the past few years, 12 firefighters, which represents a 57% turnover rate. You know, and as a staff of 21 personnel, that's a huge loss. It costs us, you know, a lot of revenue. It costs us a lot of, you know, time to bring in new firefighters. I sat down with Chief Shanahan late last year and started working on, I knew he had a plan in place. We also are going to try to mimic a plan just like the PD does. We did a pay study. The North Carolina Association of Fire Chiefs did a pay study a couple of years ago. We modified that study and, you know, added some different elements closer to home that maybe didn't participate in the fire chief study. And what we found was the state average from the study was $35,500 a year is starting pay for a firefighter. Our firefighter starting pay is $33,100 a year. And it hasn't changed since I've been here. I think it's been that way for many years. Hasn't even increased with cost of living increases or anything of that nature. But when we looked at that pay study, you know, at 35.5, you know, we looked at the 7 coastal agencies, and the average starting pay for a firefighter for coastal agencies was $37,755. So it just shows that our starting pay was very much below. When you looked at the Association of Fire Chiefs pay study, it was very similar in that it came out to $37,274. So what we're proposing in this year's budget is to increase our starting salary to $36,000, which is a $2,900 a year increase. This is mimicking what PD did several years ago. They've actually done this twice since they implemented it because they started at $33,100 as well. But we're looking at a $36,000 starting pay. And of course, to do that, we would need to raise all firefighter salaries up $2,900 to alleviate any type of compression. And that's what we're looking at. We're still looking at a a little bit less than what the average would be starting pay, but we're also looking at a firefighter career ladder. The firefighter rank is our largest rank structure. It actually encompasses the most number of people. So we go from firefighter to lieutenant to captain and then to administrative chief level positions. So we have 3 captains, 3 lieutenants, and then we have 12 firefighters. So what the firefighter rank structure will provide us is an ability for firefighters to have a future and look towards at least advancement within the same rank. So again, we're mirroring what PD did a couple of years ago and developing firefighter 1, firefighter 2, and then a senior firefighter position. And that would be based on time and grade as well as additional certifications that are above and beyond what the minimum requirements are. And of course, that career ladder is laid out in a document in the book as well. That's one of the biggest things that we're looking at this year. And obviously it's a process, but we really need to look at retaining our firefighters. It's a big issue for us to have to continually hire firefighters. But if we can retain them through competitive salaries and through a rank structure, career ladder, then once they're here for 3, 4, and 5 years, you typically don't see them leave because they can't necessarily go to another fire department as a lateral move and do any additional salary basis. Now, they may want to go to another fire department to advance in rank, and, we can't necessarily blame them for that, right? So if they wanted to go to another fire department to be a captain or a chief level position, that's good for them. That's a bonus for them to be able to advance their rank and structure and be able to advance themselves. And, you really can't blame a man for that or a lady. But if we can keep them at the firefighter rank, then we don't have to worry about them utilizing Surf City as a stepping stone to potentially go from, Surf City to the next fire department to make $1,000 more a year or $2,000 more a year. We can keep them for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and maybe even they can get that promotion within the department and stay even longer. I mean, that's always the goal. Not everybody wants to be an officer. Obviously, once you move from firefighter to lieutenant rank, you change roles. You become more of a supervisory role, more of a management role. So not everybody wants that, but they also want some stability, and they want a future, and they want to be able to progress from a salary standpoint. And right now we don't have a position to do that. And this career ladder to go from firefighter to senior firefighter would allow that career ladder, if you will. Any questions on that?
I can't understand why we lose them to Jacksonville, though.
To Jacksonville?
Yeah, we've lost several to Jacksonville.
Not since I've been here, not to the city of Jacksonville.
We have before.
We have
Before, but not since I've been here.
Losing most of ours to Pender, and that's basically who we're
That's the
losing.
largest.
That's the largest
organization we're
person
losing.
that we're losing them to is Pender.
To where?
Pender EMS.
Well, how much, you got Pender in here?
It should be in there.
Should be.
Your numbers again, you had 3 captains, 3 lieutenants, and
12 firefighters.
12 firefighters.
And then yourself, so that's 19, but you said.
So we have myself, and we have Deputy Chief Hobbs, and then we have Fire Marshal Burton.
What was that other billet?
Fire Marshal Burton.
So that's the 21.
Yep.
That's 3 more.
That's correct, yes. The 3 administrative chief positions.
So I'm assuming you did the comparison between what it takes to bring on these replacements compared to the additional 2,900. I'd imagine it's more than 2,900 to make up for the loss.
Yes, sir. And
So
we're
it's-
just having a hard time even filling the position to get people to apply for that position at 33.1. So even the people that we're getting, if they're willing to come for 33.1, they're not necessarily the experienced. They may be just out of the academy. Sometimes that may be okay, but when we're losing experienced firefighters, we really need to bring in experienced firefighters to fill that
That
role.
makes sense. Thank you.
Any other?
I think we commend Chief Wilson for stepping up and certainly working with the already existing structure at police department. I think you've put together a solid plan in this, and having the rank and class sort of with fire department helps, objectively define that 135 process.
Right.
So from a management standpoint, I support this. I think this was certainly something I'd heard as a concern coming to the town. So we do want to try to do everything we can to support them with this.
Absolutely.
Any other questions on that? Okay, moving into the fire apparatus replacement. I know this has been talked about for the past couple of years since I've been here. One of the things that Ms. Loftus had talked to me about when I first took this job was trying to work on replacement schedules for large expenditures, trying to figure out how we can put together a replacement schedule for equipment and trucks. And we've done that for the most part for equipment because obviously not as expensive as fire apparatus. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to start that fire apparatus replacement process, and we're getting really late in the game to even start it now. Because typically fire apparatus could last anywhere from 10 to 20 years, depending on how many calls they run, how many miles are on them, the condition. Obviously, we have the elements here that eat away at our trucks a lot faster than they would inland, but we don't run them as much as, say, larger municipalities do. So we still fit within that 15-year window. So when Ms. Loftus and I sat down and talked, we talked about a 7-year replacement plan. And we could operate, because we operate 3 engines is our primary apparatus that respond to 99% of our calls. We also have a ladder truck. We also have a brush truck. We also have our rescue truck as well as our tanker. And those are apparatus that will definitely live to their expected life and possibly even beyond, because they just don't get ran as often as our engines do. So we run 2 first out engines and we have 1 engine as a reserve. We're required to have that reserve engine just in case when it's going down. We also utilize that engine, that reserve engine, as a volunteer response engine because we still utilize a good number of volunteers in our fire department. So that being said, looking at a 7-year engine replacement plan would allow the frontline engines to run 14 years and then run 7 years in reserve to get us to that 21 year. Because when you look at our current 2 frontline trucks, one is in 03 and one is in 07. Well, the 03 is in better condition than the 07 and will probably last longer than the 07. And it's a lot has to do with the elements and just that truck we're having to put more and more money into that truck to keep it going. So looking at trying to replace a truck this year, we tried the last couple of years to get something on the books. It just hasn't worked out, which is understandable. But replacing 2 apparatus within the next 2 or 3 years is reality. We're going to have to replace those trucks because they're just becoming unreliable and they're becoming money pits. Now, that being said, we can replace 1 truck within the next year. The bid and build process takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So it is a long process. So even if we were to say today we can start, we're still looking, probably close to 18 months before we get that truck. So our current apparatus still have to last for 18 months. So if we keep pushing it back, we're just pushing it back even further. With that, we've talked a little bit about the potential of purchasing the 2 apparatus that are needed together and what that cost savings would bring. And initially, the cost savings of buying 2 apparatus at one time, the contract price of the trucks could potentially be anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000, but you also can entertain some cost savings with prepayments and things like that. But the biggest difference in being able to purchase 2 apparatus at one time is, for one, you're going to spread that cost out to 2 fiscal years. And you're going to save money on equipment because you're buying more equipment at one time. You're buying both trucks at one time, but you're also going to be able to take our best truck that we have right now, which is an 03 model truck, but we can take that truck and put it into reserve status and potentially even get another 5 to 7 to 10 years out of it. That's going to be the biggest cost savings. But if we keep that truck on the road as a primary unit for another 5 to 6 years, it's not going to be worth anything after that point.
Do you have a reserve truck now?
We do. And that's the truck, that is the first truck we want to get rid of. And it actually has some value to it. It was built as a demo truck. It doesn't fit our response model. It doesn't really work for us. We can't even get it down some of the roads on the island. So it's not the best apparatus for us. There's value in that truck. I don't know how much. I'd say anywhere from $75,000 to $80,000 more than likely we could get for that truck. Our other two really don't have a whole lot of value. We could sell them. Somebody would buy them. But more than likely they'd buy them for the cab, chassis, and motor, and not the pump or the body. It's an 06, isn't it, Cap?
07.
07.
07.
So,
07 is the one that you say has value to it.
yes, sir.
Yes.
And the 03's value is that we would keep that for reserve.
Yeah, the 03 truck is the best one we have.
So we would keep that for that.
Yeah,
We could keep that one as a reserve.
that's engine 25 that's over station 25.
Okay.
It's in good shape. It's got miles on it. It's got wear and tear on it. But this truck up here is within a month, I gotta spend, well, the town's gotta spend $600 to $800 to put a radiator in.
Sounds better for you to spend it than the
Yeah.
town.
The town has to spend $600 or $800 to put a radiator in it. It's like the chief said, the elements is eat that truck alive.
Yeah.
And it's because it's on the island. But it needs to go, and we could, even putting a radiator in it, we can get money. It's got value to it, and 23-1 has value.
A truck is about
So-
$650.
Sell those two trucks. Like 2 trucks.
I'd say, selling those two apparatus, you're probably looking, you might be able to get $100,000 out of both of them,
Combined?
maybe.
Well, 100 grand's 100 grand.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, 100 grand's 100
But
grand.
there's also some operational benefits to having two trucks that are identical. We can rotate those trucks from the island to the mainland without any additional training, without any additional moving of equipment, because both trucks will be set up identical. So we feel like we can prolong the life of that truck, of those trucks, by rotating them every so often on and off the island. I know they did that prior to me coming to Surf City. They took the ladder truck off the island and put it at the mainland. And you can tell a big difference in its longevity from now to when it was. Yes, sir.
So I guess the savings that would be done by doing the multiple trucks, is that in here somewhere where we can see the cost difference?
Yeah, it's,
Yes, sir.
I saw it somewhere.
Yeah, it's in the fire apparatus
Yeah.
replacement under
But I need
capital
to get those
items.
blinds closed back there so I can read Ashley's face. I'm just kidding you. I'm just
So 22,000?
Is potential savings just on purchasing the trucks together.
Right.
And then there's
I can't
potential
read your
savings
face.
for some forms of prepayment. And of course, when you're talking about larger numbers, the percentages add up. But there's also savings in equipment that you have to purchase with new apparatus. So buying, two of everything at that point in time is a lot cheaper than buying one.
So does your current budget for next year, is it looking at 2 or 1, or you've yet to, it is 2?
So what's factored into the budget, and Alan may get to this in a second, but if we do the financing of trucks, because it's such a long process, if we do 2, then he can go ahead and start the specs and whatnot. When you do that, you can put 50% down, and then you're good to go until the trucks are built. And that's when the other 50% will come into play. So what we have budgeted in next year's budget is the 50% for 2.
Right.
Mhm.
$650,000
Yeah.
budgeted next year's budget.
And then in 2 more fiscal years will be the remainder, because it's 12 to 18 month process.
So it wouldn't be, so it would be into 21 or 21-20, I mean,
Yes.
21-22 or
22, 23 would be when the trucks would
so
actually
it'd
be
be in
ready.
22-23 the second.
Yeah.
Maybe 21,
It
20.
all depends, but it's going to either be at the end of 21-22 or the beginning of 22-23. And it just depends on scheduling.
Yeah.
And when we actually sign a contract and how long they are out of that.
And I think what we would like to try to do is time that to where the second lump sum or expenditure would be 22, 23.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And
But we would be locking both of them in this year.
And the additional, or you said equipment also, is that on the 2021 for all the equipment?
See, that would come with the lump sum. That would come at the end.
Okay, all right, thank you.
The trucks would come to us with new hose, new tools, new ladders. Everything on those 2 trucks would be identical. And they would all come, everything on that truck basically would be new.
Correct.
And that would be for both trucks. So that would mean a savings of what we're doing now. We would have spare, but right now we're short on 5-inch hose and we're short on 1 3/4 hose. We can make do till we get these trucks, but that would help the fire department. It would help your budget because hose is expensive.
Yes.
2 trucks.
Yeah.
That money goes back into the
General fund.
So the 650, does that include all that stuff on that truck?
Yes.
Fire hoses,
Yes.
ladders, all that stuff?
Yeah.
In other words, at 650, it's ready to go.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically what we're talking about is in a 3-year plan now.
Right.
Is today go ahead and approve buying 2 vehicles with all the apparatus and stuff with it, and they'll be financed over that 3-year period of time. And one that takes 18 months, so we get one solidified and then start on the other one roughly 12 months later to 14 months later.
No, sir. It would be both of them at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 big red trucks coming in.
Okay.
Right.
And on another question, while I'm thinking about it, generally on fire calls, we respond to most often, actually all of them, I think. Once we get out to a fire call, who takes charge? Because I think our equipment that we've got trumps everybody else around us except probably Pender. I don't know, I'm a layman speaking, here.
Sure.
So therefore, whenever we show up on the job, then we're put in charge of it because of our expertise and the equipment that we have.
Correct. So
Now, what compensation do we get other than interlocal agreements? What compensation do we get from some of these areas we respond to that's out of our district?
So we don't get any compensation for anybody outside of our district because that's part of our county mutual aid agreement, because they help us and we help them. Now, we do get revenue from Pender County as a contract for the Northeast Pender Fire District. And that revenue is based on 10-cent property tax in that area. And and I think there's close to 300,000 this come up here this next year in what we get annually from the county.
So basically, what I'm getting at, I don't mean to be ugly about this.
No.
But basically what I'm getting at, we don't need any help as far as from North Tops. We don't need any help from South Tops.
That's not true.
When I say that, I'm talking about as far as their apparatus and stuff goes.
Not necessarily their trucks, but we need their manpower.
The manpower, I understand, yeah, but the other things, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, we saw that on the
yep.
Action Road.
Yep.
Fire, yeah, their manpower is what?
And of course, they come in trucks, and trucks provide, additional apparatus
I
provide.
think might have had a booster on one or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, it provides, depending on what situation you're in, it could provide additional water pressure, especially when we're in our rural area, not necessarily on the island, having a relay pump or having to haul water in. That's where your additional apparatus really make a difference. Here on the island and most of our city area where we have good hydrant water, typically we can manage any type of fire with 1 or 2 apparatus, which is what we're going to bring anyway. But we need the manpower. And of course, they're going to respond in their apparatus because that's where their equipment is. And that's what their response mode is, because you just don't leave without an apparatus. You don't respond typically POV. So their apparatus will come. And it provides that good backup, just in case one fails or we have to back up and change our strategies or tactics and we need to send another engine somewhere else, especially if a fire spreads or grows. So there's definitely potential, but typically, no, we just need manpower. Any other questions? Those are the 2 largest things that we were put forth in this next year's budget. There were some other things I think that from finance and from the manager's office, they've moved some to different aspects of the budget and changed some outright purchases to some finance options. But outside of that, that's what we were. That was our 2 biggest things. But if you want to go through some of the line items, I'd be happy to. Yes, sir.
I am not nitpicking. This just helps me because this is what we're supposed to be doing.
Sure.
So I was looking here. It says charter internet. Once again, I'm not nitpicking. 18,600 for charter and charter cable and internet.
Are you at utilities?
Yeah, 18,600. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm missing something that is super expensive to me. What's that come to a month?
All of
$1,500 a month for TV and internet. That's a lot. On Town of Surf City itemized line item worksheet.
So
is that the best we can do? Because
no, we're looking at 8,600.
Oh, excuse me, 8,600. Sorry,
and that's for the 2 stations.
8,600. I'm talking. 8,600.
And I get those numbers based off of what we spend in the utilities from previous years. I don't actually do those contracts. That's a town-wide event. But that's what
Actually, I'm not being nosy about 86. It just seems,
that's fine.
To me, it seems $8,600 a lot for television and internet.
Well, no, it's the internet.
It's Town of Surf City line item worksheet. It's on these ones here.
Tab 2 in your book, Johnson.
On these side items here. Tab 2. The blue one, it says line item entry.
Oh, on tab 2.
Yep. Yeah, and then go to the side there. And then one more thing. So and then another thing too is, I see you have here, and once again, I don't want to seem like I'm nitpicking.
No worries.
But you have a total of $7,000 for municipal county government for travel and for your travel and for your course, and then $6,000 for the chief officer training travel and course. That's 13 grand. Is that something that is required? I'm just curious. And I'm not questioning because I don't take a $13,000, you know what I'm saying?
So part of that is required training. The other part is the local government municipal not finance course, just municipal government course that I was looking at taking. I'm talking with, it was recommended to me in the past to look at that course to take, and it was something that we budgeted for this year. And, so far, I've talked to Mr. Manager about it, and, he felt like it would be a good course for me to take as well. Okay. So it's 2 separate things.
Yeah. And so Chief, because what I'm saying here is one of the things that I've done through COVID-19 is I've had to make cuts on things that I would normally do. Like I'm not going to take the vacation I'm supposed to take. And there were some things I'm not going to do business-wise because of the situation we're in. And regardless, but you understand my question, right?
Yes.
If you have 3,500 here for meals and lodging, 2,500 for 2 officers registration, travel, hotel meals, 4,000 for community. And once again, I'm not nitpicking you. If that's what it's important that you have to do and the manager says it, I'm good with that. But it does, for me, an explanation would be helpful because it's $13,000 that you're asking for us to give you $1 million, $1.3 million for fire trucks. Every dime counts right now. I don't have enough police officers. Every dime counts. You want raises. Every dime counts. So can you help me with this if you don't mind?
Sure. So you have, what you have there, I'd like to know exactly which ones you're looking at.
All right, so
because you have 3 different people.
yeah, so I have, so I am, if everybody wants to know, if I'm into training, if everybody wants to know. So it would be, everybody see it? Okay, so into training. And
So
then,
those are, and Alan, you can probably help us, but a lot of those are probably mandatory as opposed to optional
correct.
in regards to keeping
The only thing
certification.
that's optional is the local government. This one here.
For 4,000.
Yes. Everything else is mandatory training for the chief level officers.
If something's optional for $4,000, something should be not done if we're gonna give raises out.
Sure.
I'm just being upright in this time of year.
And that's something that we will certainly need to look at is optional and mandatory training. We have had, I would say, a savings this year because nobody's been traveling for the last 2 months
Correct.
in the entire
Correct.
town. But yeah, that would be the municipal county administration course, I think. Is that right, Chief?
Yeah, Ashley too. I mean, I'd like to see, you scare me when it comes to finances. So I would like to understand, I would like to see if we could get a better than $8,600 for internet
Yes.
and television.
Yes.
Okay, I know those guys have to watch TV, I get it, but
Mr. Lingle?
We'll have to check these out.
Yeah.
no, that's not internet for the town, that's just for the fire department. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's all in the same contract.
Okay. Yeah.
If you could just
Yeah.
help me out.
Jason and I'll look at the
If you
contract.
could, and once
see.
again,
Sure.
I'm not questioning your guys' ability to make a decision, I'm just
Yeah.
checking on these.
I think it's
Because-
actually cheaper than what it used to be. Unfortunately.
Huh?
Unfortunately. But with the municipal and county administration, there is a scholarship with that he can apply for.
Okay.
And typically, if it's your first time applying, with the municipal and county administration course that Councilman Sugarts was asking about under training.
Travel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
going back to travel fire department.
Yes. Which is also part of that municipal course.
Okay, I got $1,000 and then $3,000 for travel to UNC School of Government.
So that course is over a year time period. It's not a one-time
8
course.
months.
It is every month for almost a whole year. So it's hotel, it's, he wouldn't have fuel, you would have fuel costs, but he wouldn't have mileage reimbursements, but it's hotel and
But he'd
food.
have mileage
No,
reimbursement.
because he has a town vehicle. No. So it's hotel and it's food for every month that he goes to that course. Yeah. It's not just a one-time course like the majority of them are.
It's probably their most extensive course they offer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's extremely beneficial. I think all department heads should do it.
If they could at some point in their career.
Mhm.
It's something that I did several years ago.
Okay, so how long is the course when you
It's,
go there?
it's basically 4 days every month. You go to Chapel Hill and you
So
actually,
you spend 4 days up there every month?
that's correct, for 8 months. 8 or 9 months.
32 days a year.
Yeah.
And that's every year you do that?
Every, once a month for 8 months and then you're
So, I
done.
mean, every year?
no, you're good.
No, just
No,
1
no,
year.
Okay,
I'm not sorry, but I'm hating.
No.
okay,
Okay, I got one more question. I'm really, once again,
all right.
so medical physicals, will you educate me this, Ashley, too? Because it says $500 for annual physicals times
Yes.
30, it's 15 grand.
Yes.
So,
They have a doctor per se that comes in and does these physicals. It's a requirement that they have to be a firefighter.
and so there's no co-pays, no insurance with that. We pay
No.
$500 with that out the door per fireman.
Mm-hmm.
That's NFPA.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Your local physician won't do an NFPA visit.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Wow.
The more, it's, Jeremy, it's more of an intense physical.
I don't disagree. Well, I think on a lighter note, the general repair and maintenance parts and labor says 10 grand. That should be done by Councilman Helms. We should take that off there. So, right, $1,000, so. That was all. Okay, so thank you. Thank you. And a lot of these, am I right about this or not? With new trucks, some of these issues, we won't have the maintenance on some of these trucks once we get some new trucks, right? Because there's a lot of.
That's right. You'll have a warranty and you'll have.
Now, are you going to get certified to repair the new trucks, Councilman?
They don't change in repairs.
Okay, just check.
They just get more, they just get fewer.
That's my questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions for Chief Wilson? All right, you better.
Thank you, Alan.
You better get going.
That's all right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, we can keep rolling into utilities.
Let's go.
We got
That's the last thing.
for today, but then we'll do a wrap up because I don't want to sell you guys short on anything. So, Bryce, I believe you're up, sir.
Thank you.
See you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
This is David Price, his second day on the job here.
Councilman Fowler and I are just sitting there thinking, David's walking, we're saying, oh my gosh, what am I walking into here?
Yeah. Yeah, day number 2.
I appreciate y'all's time today. We're kind of in a little bit of evolution. Forgive me, I missed some of your initial spill, but we are transferring from being a public works into a utility. A lot of problems we had in the past was retainment. And with the new structure, do you have the new structure up at all, or?
No, I don't have org chart. I can pull it up if you want.
Well, no, that's fine. I can explain it.
Okay.
There'd be a deputy that'd be handling the overarching projects. Like I've talked to many of you all about the capacity and some of the larger items. The deputy director would be handling a lot of the day-to-day running. And each division, which will split up into 3 divisions, wastewater treatment, water treatment, and collections and distribution. And I believe most of y'all know what collection distribution is, but if you don't, it's pretty much anything you see out in town. That's not part of the plant. Those are guys you see out in the field. Well, in the city, excuse me.
You didn't take that over on this, did you?
That's me. I couldn't get it. I don't have paper big enough to print it.
So with that, with that in mind, the budget's kind of straightforward. We focus mostly on the capital improvements, and we'll get to that in a minute. No new trucks, no new personnel as of now. We'll let everything shake out a little bit. Just to go through here, see if there's any major changes.
David, you're saying you don't need any new trucks right now?
I'm thinking that's not the priority right now.
Okay.
I'm not gonna say we don't need stuff.
Okay.
The priority right now is these capital improvement projects.
Okay.
Like I said, do see, especially in the water plant line items, that we have up the number of costs for maintenance of vehicles. They keep them on the road a little bit longer until we get our feet under us and get a good plan going here for replacement of vehicles, which we will be working on. A lot of the line items you see have decreased. What we've done is instead of paying engineers and capital improvement projects at operations, a separate budget will be set for that. So you see a lot of items that get decreased for that reason. The money didn't go away, it's just being kept somewhere else. The only line item that really increased that I can see is travel and training. We got 3 new employees this year. They ain't been to first school yet. Working with water and sewer, they need to know what they're doing. They need to know their dangers. That's, to me, that's important, very important. You know, we deal with pathogens every day. They need to know what they're doing.
Can you go back to your flow chart of quickly? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can you tell me who those people are there, if you don't mind, just the deputy and then the three underneath, and that's what I'm just curious.
Deputy's actually being advertised right now. That dropped yesterday. Advertising for current personnel.
For internal, okay.
That's good.
Do we have
Being
any,
advertised now.
do we have any candidate, is there any candidates for that internally for that right now?
And just as a caution, getting into personnel and we're
Okay, got
live
it.
and
Okay.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So we don't want to get
Okay, got it.
So in other words, you don't have the personnel laid out on that yet, right?
Sir.
You're working on the personnel for that.
Well, I was saying that we just don't want to get too deep into personnel discussion about individuals because we're in an open session.
Right, okay.
Question out there, you work with HR, that's being advertised this week. As soon as that one, deputy, gets appointed, then the next one on the slate is collections distribution supervisor. From that one, depending on how things shakes out from there, because that's gonna be vacancy, so if we hire internally,
Got it.
we'll look at the water treatment plan and the wastewater treatment plan.
Got it. Okay.
But first, the deputy, which is being advertised this week.
Got it.
And from there, actually, the distribution was my title before. That's the next one I'm gonna play after that.
Okay, got it.
It will hopefully be advertised later this week, beginning next week from Liddy. So.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
And sorry, I think we forget we're,
All right, it's okay.
I forgot, so.
Yeah, we can't talk about employees.
Well, I was talking nice about him.
Yes, no,
It was
wasn't
nice. I
going
was
down the
talking nice
wrong
about
path.
it. It was nice stuff.
Like I said, if there's anything particular you want to call out about the operations, I'm glad to talk about it. Like I said, it's just the no vehicles. We do have equipment for a trailer, but everything else is general maintenance, keep things running. The capital improvement is ticket. That's where we put most of our focus. Juniper Swamp expansion is the next one that's looking to get built. Currently, that is looking to go bid within this budget year. We're looking to that to go bid in February. The Headworks, Well 6, and the ICW Crossing, we are seeking a low interest loan with a portion of it being low forgiveness. We'll get the answer to that in August, early September. That will answer how quickly we move on that. Like I said, this is very fluid right now because we're going after state money. The brine disposal and the iron irrigation, we got good news on that. That's moving forward. Brine disposal, that's going to be about a 1.5 year permitting process. You've probably seen some Surf City employees out on boat in the coastal waterway. They were not. They were doing the job. They're taking geohydrologists out there to sample 2 sites on Woodford brine. We have to prove to the state that dumping salt water in the sound is not going to hurt. So that's what they're doing. That's going to take about a 1.5 years to get that permit. Like I said, if you want to go into any more detail, we've been talking about this for a while. A lot of these projects. Little Kinston stormwater replacement. Utility department currently maintains the stormwater system. That is a stormwater system that's essential. That's on Little Kinston. That is already permitted and ready to go. If we get that going, that can be built. Engineering has been done on that. So like I said, most of these jobs on our engineering calendar, I know they stretch out a little bit more on the capital outlay, but on our actual engineering calendar, majority of these jobs are scheduled to be completed in 2022. You got any more questions? I'm glad to take them.
So will it take till 2022 to get the brine project finished?
That's going to take the longest because it is we did the initial scout on Monday. We take the hydrogeologists out there, looking at 2 sites. They all favored one of them. They did a report. We're going to sit down and between staff and council pick a site where we want to go to, and from there we will talk to the state for our permitting process.
And that's where we'll have to take a trip to Raleigh, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
To go meet with that permitting staff and explain our case. But good news is that all these projects are moving forward And then we got a couple of things as far as potential land acquisition, kind of cooking, of course. And perhaps in the next month or so, we can get a full update or detail update on all the projects. But I don't think any of them are technically stalled out, so that's good.
So where are we at on the acquisition of the land for the wastewater? Where are we at with that?
That is a closed session item.
Yeah.
If you're going to call.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I swear.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that.
I swear.
There was one that we were.
Sorry again.
I'm learning. That we actually got property owner permission to go out and look at, and the results were not favorable for the expense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
You
just wanted to sample it.
Yeah, no, you're okay. You're okay.
Here already owned, and then we move forward with those. Answers any of your questions.
Yes.
We're looking at several other pieces. Currently, county base, account, all the pieces we're looking at now.
Yep. That's a good summary. So again, yes, moving forward, Bryce picking these things up and really taking the bull by the horns on them, which is very much appreciated. I think that we can probably go over to the next thing, which is probably going to be the more direct discussion that we need to have with council in looking at the cost to operate our utility, the cost for expansion, et cetera. We really do need to look at our rates, our water and sewer rate structure. So we are recommending that council consider increasing utility rates. We really want to take a calculated approach to this and really look at what we're selling as a resource. And it's not something that we can produce for free, even though sometimes it seems like you flush a toilet and it just goes away. But obviously we know that there's major costs associated with water and sewer utilities. So the more we use, the more costly it is. And what we are presenting is what we feel is a direct representation of that in a rate structure that mirrors a conservation approach to really send home a message to high water users that there may be things that they can do to curb their usage, reduce their usage, because again, these are precious resources that we need to make sure that we're looking at. So what staff did was put together a pretty detailed spreadsheet, and I wouldn't focus too much on the columns beyond the current and proposed rate, even though the information is broken down. I guess the easiest way to sort of look at this is a per unit cost associating a unit with thousands of gallons per month. So as you can see in the column, or excuse me, the PowerPoint slides that you have in front of you with the dark background and the yellow bar charts show you sort of what the impact of this would be. So if we look at the residential rate structure, for the water and sewer utilities, there would be no change in the 0 to 5,000 gallons per month rate structure. The correlating impact of that is that equates to 93% of your customers within the utility. So 93% of those, if they maintain their usage through the next fiscal year, would see no increase in their utility rate. Jumping up to the 5 to 10,000 gallon tier structure, you would have 5% or 198 utility customers that would see a fairly substantial rate increase. You're going for water from $4 per unit to $5 per unit. So, that could be an additional, it's $25 a month in their water utilities bill. It is fairly substantial.
Who would be an example of that?
We have we've pulled a full spreadsheet on all of our utility customers. So when you think about who's using 5,000 to 10,000 gallons per month, it's probably going to be residential.
My house, probably.
Okay, so folks probably with
Probably a 12-bedroom house, right?
larger families or larger homes.
I have 3 daughters.
There you go.
A lot of you folks, when you're doing vacation, the water rate, if you looked at the people that's renting, their water rates the way they use water is absurd.
Right. So there's not a whole lot of conservation methodology going behind the user on that. This would help instill some of that thought process. And then 2% or 53 customers at 10,000 gallons per month or more. One other thing to look at, and something that staff is evaluating too, is water for irrigation. We're treating water, and then people are turning around and using that on their lawns. And when you don't really see a huge increase in your bill, you're probably more apt to pay, the $4.38, where this would jump to $5.67. So the town also wants to explore options of selling back reuse water that would come from our wastewater at a much lower rate. So people can still irrigate their lawns with this reuse water at like half the cost is what they would pay. It brings money back into the utility, but there's a capital cost to that as well, running pipe and doing some upfits to the wastewater treatment plant and pumps, but that might be an option. We can sell this.
Save us from having to buy more irrigation land too.
Yes, we don't want to. Now as we know, that's a double-edged sword because we can't rely on it because it's an optional thing for people to irrigate. So we might have a wet month and people aren't watering their lawns, and so we can't bank on it. However, we are getting rid of the water in the ponds that has to be drawn down and irrigated. So in a roundabout way, we can answer that question. But
it actually, in the long run, saves.
Yes, but we got to be cautious about it because we can't.
You can't say it does.
That's right. That's right. And a couple other options that we would be looking at. But as we see new development coming into town, we can capture these users and have all of that infrastructure put in place when they're developing their development. So, Bryce, I don't mean to steal your thunder, sir. I know you know a lot about it too.
Well, like I said, just to hit on the point you said a minute ago about conservation, a lot of you all see the reports we put out monthly or biweekly now about how much water we produce during the summertime when we hit those million gallons a day, 1.4 million gallons a day. A third of that during the summer is straight on irrigation. We trace that straight to going on someone's yard. Like I said, this will really try to curb that, and not only will it help the wastewater plant eventually with reuse, but also delay us need to upgrade that water plant. Like I said, right now we're sitting pretty good with the water plant. We're, I said our peak is 1.4 and we are capable of 2.6, but we're growing very fast. Our city is.
The reality of it is, isn't it, if you use more of anything in life, it costs more money?
It should be.
Okay, I just was curious.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
On the irrigation system, do they pay the same rate? In other words, if they got a meter separate, they pay the same rate regardless of whether it's irrigation or the house.
They don't pay the sewer.
They don't pay the sewer.
They don't pay the sewer. They have a separate meter just for the water.
Right.
They pay the same thing for water, but not
Yeah.
the cost of the sewer.
Okay, got you.
So I guess the comparison to that is going to be the sewer then as well. And the numbers are consistent with however much water you're using. The sewer rate is direct correlation to it. Again, same percentages would apply to that, but you have a larger increase when you get to the 5,000 up to the 30,000 plus. It also costs us a lot more money to treat and dispose of wastewater than it does to produce drinking water.
So the decision for this increase is going to come when we vote on the budget?
And rate structure, yes, sir.
That's part of the budget?
That's correct. Yeah.
Will it be inclusive or is that a separate item?
No, it would be inclusive of
all as one package?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so before we get there, the question I had, we discussed it a little bit, but so for the council in general, was how do we compare rates to other municipalities? I think that would help.
And we have some time, we can pull up some of that up.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be today. I'm just saying, I just want to have that as a data point.
If it helps at all, Surf City actually hasn't raised their rate since 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
I was just fixing to say,
It's been since 2015, and when studying this, figure out the best way to go about this, we pulled what it's actually costing the town to treat the water and wastewater. And over that same period, we've had a minimum of a 7% increase across the board. And some items, it's hard to compare because things increase at different rates. Some items are much of 12% increase to treat per 1,000 gallons. And that's what we were kind of basing this off of.
Yeah, and that's what I asked, my first question was, we start talking about rates and revenues is the tire that Price has to put on a truck doesn't cost the same today as it did 4 years ago. The chemical, the more water we're producing, the more chemicals we have to put in it and purchase. So the operational costs go up and the rates.
Well, Kyle, it's really not a rate increase. Really, it's not. If you really, because somebody like Councilman Fowler or maybe Mayor Mellon, they're not using more water. So they're under that 5,000 cap, so it doesn't affect them.
That's
right? So it's a service really increase more than anything. If you're using more of the service, you're paying for more of the service, basically.
right.
Yeah, so it's a no-brainer, actually.
And talking about the fees, Dwight, the Council of Government, I think, in the last 7 years has encouraged us very strongly to increase our rates. I know of 3 times. We have not done that because we didn't feel it was necessary to do that because of our citizens at that time. And I know it's been at least 4 or 5 years since we have done that. So this would just basically catch up and it's only paying for the service. It's just what they use. So I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, I'm not against it. I just want to know. In comparison.
You're going to get the question.
Yeah.
And the only people that's going to be affected is the people that's abusing the water system. And I'm telling you, I'll say the same thing Buddy had. The Council of Government has really been on our case to increase these rates tremendously, and we haven't done that because of the just looking after our taxpayers.
Maybe times, I just want to get that
Yeah.
information so I could, when I have these conversations with people, I could tell them how we compare to others. And we're only doing what's needed to be done to support the increases in operations that you've described, and also to just, bring us on par with where we're supposed to be.
Yeah. So this is, I'll show you this real quick. This is the water and wastewater rate dashboard. So UNC does a good job at collecting all of this data. You can scroll down, just bear with me here, to pull Surf City. I'm doing my alphabet in my head.
Well, there it is.
So this is talking about a bill comparison at $65.64 for water bill at 10,000 gallons per month. The average is $61.50. The max is $204 for that. This is using the bill comparison for all of those jurisdictions. So you can take this, you can look at water, you can look at just sewer bill comparison, and then you can look at water and sewer, keeping in mind at 10,000 gallons per month. So then you can look at comparisons within 50 miles or 100 miles, and it'll pull this additional data. So again, the median at 140, we'd be at 158, the max being at 242. And what I was trying to get is that there's an data export. This is not working on their tool right now, where we could actually look at the real numbers from these other jurisdictions.
But now when you look at them, you need to look, because if you'll notice the ones that have water and sewer.
Yes.
Even the water is probably going to be a little higher than one that just furnishes water. It's
That's
a whole
right.
lot cheaper.
Absolutely.
Just to furnish water like Topsail Beach is doing.
Yes.
Than it is to furnish water and sewer.
Yes. Yeah.
And Nag's Head too. That's the same way with Nag's Head. They're still on septic tanks.
Right.
Compare apples.
Yeah.
Sure to compare apples.
And it's very difficult, but what we need to do is look at what our operational costs are through Price's budget for the water department, for the sewer department, both of them combined. And as a reminder, when the budget process moves forward, they'll be combined into just a single source of utilities, and Price will oversee water and sewer collection and distribution all in one singular budget. Because when you look at this, these changes weren't made. So you'll see several different actual budgets, but cumulatively they will make up the utility department. So you're welcome. So this is just a good tool. Again, looking at the conservation methodology of setting rates, and once we set the conservation rates in place, then we can then systematically go back and look at operational cost increases and incrementally adjust those for future fiscal years. But I think if the town could do this, we would be setting ourselves up for future success in when we need to just do a simple increase. There's justification to it, right, essentially.
I think if you click on that financial benchmark tab at the top, that'll kind of show you if your rates are what you had it on the rate comparison tab, what your overall financial health would be if you approve the rates as they are. If you take away that rate increase, a lot of those dials end up either in the red or in the yellow, pretty close to the red.
Okay.
And the goal is obviously to keep it within the green. That's a lot of information in there if you ever have time to sit and read.
Where's that link?
I can send it to you.
I sent them the booklet that reviews and goes over pretty much water and wastewater throughout the state, and it'll tie you back to the website that's hosted. I think it's School of Government,
Yep.
it's the Rural Association, I can't remember.
It's environmental finance.
There you go.
Yep.
That's the subject line?
It's UNC School of Government, Environmental Finance.
Okay, thanks.
So that's kind of in a nutshell how that looks and how that's being presented to council. We do understand that this is a pretty major decision for you to make, and would request that you review this. If you need information, please let us know what information you might want, and we'll send that over to you. But again, you will get questions on it. We can easily identify who these users are. We can share that with you. So if there's any sort of preemptive strikes that you feel you need to do to discuss with your constituents, we can certainly try.
Yeah, I'm interested, especially on the commercial side, because I want to see how much of it can they actually control. Maybe they're using high rates because the business they're in, it just comes with the territory.
You might have a car wash.
I just don't know. That's what I want to kind of see that.
Absolutely.
Now, does this take into effect like Plurus and those private companies around?
No. Their rates are set by the utility commission.
Right.
And when they request a rate increase, they justify it through their own financials. But this is all public utilities essentially that are controlled by the elected officials who set the rates.
Right. So we're controlled by the government where.
They're controlled by the Utilities Commission. Yeah. And we're controlled basically by the LGC, who's going to say,
correct.
Y'all have too much debt in your water and sewer infrastructure. You need to raise your rates.
Right.
Yeah, and they will.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
That's what we've been ducking.
Yeah, so every year with the audit, just to kind of catch you up to speed, every year with the financial audit, and luckily the last 2 to 3 years, we have not received a letter from the LGC. Once that audit is completed by S. Preston Douglas, it's submitted to the LGC. They review it. If they deem that your financials are not where they need to be, i.e. fund balance and so forth, then they will send you a letter and say, these are the things that you need to fix or you need to improve. And they have the authority to say, you need to raise your rates to X, Y, and Z, or you need to increase your property taxes.
What has it been, 2 or 3 years since we had the rate increase on the water and
Yeah,
sewer?
a little bit more than that.
2015, yeah.
But yeah, it's whenever you go to acquire debt for water and sewer, you have to go to the LGC to ask for their permission. They have to grant you the authority to acquire that debt. So if your financial health is not good, then you might as well not even go in front of the LGC.
And that's when we look at these projects.
If you don't do what they say, then you go to borrow money and say.
There's a chance we wouldn't be able to pursue the projects that we need to pursue without raising rates, because they want to look at a healthy financial situation in water and sewer.
But the audit we just heard at the beginning of this discussion found it to be in good condition.
From the prior fiscal year.
Yeah.
So if we want to have.
We're just being proactive.
Yeah, if we want to, because we know what our needs are.
Yeah.
And that's what the good thing about having a capital improvement plan is, we're looking to the future as a town and identifying these needs, and then are essentially reacting to what those needs will be by doing things today.
Got it.
And I will say, from an auditor's perspective, financial stability and financial health compared to the LGC's definition of financial stability and health, they vary, because the auditor will look at it from the perspective of, well, your expenditures did not exceed your revenues, so you're good. You had $5 that went into your fund balance, you're okay. But the LGC may say, oh no, you need $100 going into that fund balance, so here's what you need to do to get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think auditors really look at capital outlay down the road. I mean, they don't.
That's not what they're
looking
supposed
at
to
what
do.
you want,
Mm-mm.
what you're gonna need next year.
No.
Year after. They're just looking at right now.
And they're there to give an opinion on those statements, to say that you all can rely on those statements, that they are true and accurate.
Right.
Certifying.
Correct.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And congratulations.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's gonna be a challenge for me to keep up with him, so that's good.
If he falls, man, he's hanging like the day.
He's gonna have his tie by the time he gets to the bottom step.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's working
He
hard.
used to wear no tie. Sure.
Okay, so again, this information here, I understand it's difficult to read. However, this corresponds with this Excel spreadsheet that I emailed everybody, and you can go through each department line item by line item to really look at what's being requested, what is going to be funded for the upcoming fiscal year. And then on the other sheet with the tiny crunched numbers, all it is the separate tab on that spreadsheet with your revenues. So you can go through, with some paper guidance, looking at all it is this same spreadsheet that I sent. That's up on the screen. So you have all of the information that compiles the entire budget. One thing I do want to mention is we did try to build in a 2% COLA into the budget for employees. This would be on top of the merit type of increases that departments are working very hard to implement into their budgets. I think what we've seen is the town loses employees to other jurisdictions, whether that's police, fire, admin, whatever it is. So department heads are working to try to put in some sort of objective criteria. I always say police and fire got it easy because we know what going from a firefighter 1 to a firefighter 2 is. Where it gets difficult is what are we measuring our human resources on? What are we measuring Parks and Rec on? Some of the things that, you don't go from a Parks and Rec programmer 1 to a Parks and Rec programmer 2. It's just a singular position within a pay grade. So that's what department heads are working on in their evaluations. All of those have been completed. They're turned in. I requested self-evaluations from department heads just because I hadn't been here long enough for that. So a lot of good work on the employees' behalf, moving the town forward. I'm extremely proud of all of their hard work in compiling this, and then certainly Ashley's crunching and presenting this in a format that we can understand it and ultimately communicate this back to the general public.
What if any was increased last year?
2.
2?
We've done 2% for the past, probably since I've been here. I mean,
Years ago, before the
Yeah.
financials were a little bit better, we were done, I think, up to 5%.
Yeah, we got up to 5% one time.
And
Yes,
then
not later.
Then when the economy kind of tanked, I believe we went to no percent for a few years, and then I think we did 1, and then it's been standard at 2 for the last few years.
And I do mention, COLA should be based on the economy, and that's it.
Right.
What we need to do is build in those merits for people doing a good job. So
What kind of percentage do we put in the merit pay? Are you figuring?
Well, that's incrementally being worked on. As you saw, the fire department is just now getting around to the 5%.
Yeah, that's gonna be pretty good. That'd be a big.
Absolutely. Police department has done that.
That's gonna be what, 5 or 6% on the firemen?
5%, I think, is to the at minimum at $2,900 a baseline to go into that if we move forward with that.
Look,
I'm not fussing, I'm just saying.
I know you're not fussing, but
I wouldn't do anything to the fire department.
But I will tell you where the chief was coming from. We had 6 or 8 people scheduled to do interviews.
I know. Well, how much?
3 showed up.
How much is Pender East paying?
I know one of ours came from Wilmington, and he took a pay cut to come here only because he lives closer, so his travel would be less.
Yeah.
He actually didn't lose money because his travel expense, it pretty well offset it.
Yeah, but the money, actual money in his pocket was a loss.
yeah, he doesn't have Pender Fire and EMS.
So
I know, I didn't say Pender East in there.
But
again, if we do cost of living adjustments, that doesn't mean every employee will get a merit increase, because there's going to be some employees that do their job and don't want to do additional and don't want to do.
But now they're going to all get the $2,900, right?
For fire, if we move forward with his plan.
That's what
I would
yes.
recommend we
Yeah.
do.
Yes.
Well, the cost of living, it looks like 2020 cost of living allowance adjustments is 1.6% on average nationally. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah. That'll help us retain, that'll help us keep what we got.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you, it's an asset because it's police and fire experience is everything. Because you take a rookie policeman out here and you put him in a certain situation, he's not going to do the same thing that a
Season
first season officer done. And same way with fire.
Yeah.
And we're talking safety too. And it's expensive to clothe and everything for firemen. It's the same thing, not quite as bad for policemen, but when you're talking about turnout gear for firemen, you're talking about $2,500 to
At minimum.
$5,000. And that gets old after you go through as many as the chief said, and I knew as many as we've gone through. It's costing the town money not to retain these employees and firemen and policemen because it costs. It costs because it's just like me and you. We don't wear the same size shoes or the same size pants or the same size coat. Well, a lot of you, it's the same way with firemen, the same way with policemen. You can't ask them to take somebody else's clothes because it won't fit.
Okay.
So
I think we'd all agree with you.
Yeah.
They don't wear the same size.
Yeah, no, they don't.
So moving forward, again, the information has been presented to council. We would love to continue to answer questions, and we have a work session scheduled on Friday, and we have reserved additional budget discussion as an item on that.
What I would like to say, can we have the same kind of meeting Friday instead of doing it online? I think we've got it advertised as online, but I think we need to do this same kind of meeting.
Come in here
Yeah.
for Friday.
I'm talking about instead of.
I'm gonna have to check the general statutes on what my leeway time is for mending a calendar 3 days ahead of time for a work session. It's not an emergency or special meeting.
Do what?
I'll have to check the general statutes.
We amending the calendar?
Okay, if not, I think we need to reschedule.
It's just a location.
Right, I think we need to reschedule another meeting
It's not our.
because we may need to bring some of these people back in.
So if I will need to know who we want to bring in, and if there's other departments you want to talk to,
Right.
just let me know. But again, we're not putting any pressure on council, but we will need to have the budget ready for public consumption with a statutory timeline, et cetera. So
What's our goal?
So the goal was to approve the budget at the June, I believe it's second work session. In order to meet general statutes for advertising, that means it's going to need to be published this Thursday, May the 14th, for inspection because of the way the Pender Post works.
This Thursday, we've got to have it.
It needs to be open for inspection for at
just
least,
open.
for at
No
least
way.
10 days.
No.
If you want to approve it June 2nd.
Then we need to have we need to,
That's less than 48 hours. They want us to.
we need to recess this meeting. And
That's only if you want to approve it June 2nd. If you want to schedule
We
another.
can do it on
meeting,
June 19th.
We can do whatever, I've got more time. But if
Okay.
you want to approve it June 2nd, I've got to make deadlines this week. But if you don't care about approving it June 2nd.
when have we got to have it?
By June 30th.
Okay, when have we got to have it approved?
I need 14 days to advertise.
And it's got to be approved by June 30th.
Yeah, June 19th will be your scheduled work session. That's June 19th is the Friday work session.
We could do it then, right?
You could do it then.
Okay, so you have to have a public hearing and then you have to wait 24 hours to
Right,
actually
so we
approve
got
it.
to
So it
have
has
the
to
public
happen
hearing
two
first,
separate
so.
times.
So I would suggest we formally adopt the, could that be weekend? If we have a public hearing on the 19th, could we adopt it on the?
You would have to have a public hearing on the 19th. You would just have to vote to move forward with that. I would need to then publish it.
How about this? We will present you a calendar that is statutorily correct
Okay,
on Friday.
all right.
That'll work.
All right, are we gonna have that meet and Friday here? Or are we gonna have it?
My opinion is you can show up anywhere you want. And if you all decide to show up here,
We got some technical difficulties. We got a backstep for this thing. We cannot participate on live video all in one room because we don't have the technology to do it. If you want to Zoom and see your face, you're all gonna have to be in separate rooms if you want to be in one building or at your house or whatever. We can be here and live stream with audio as we have today, but we do not have the capabilities to videotape and put out how we are. So that's y'all's decision.
Zoom?
it would be
What are we
YouTube,
doing?
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the decision?
So we will maintain,
I like this format. I mean,
I
as
like
far
this
as
format too.
discussing budget, I like this format
Better than Zoom.
better than Zoom. I mean, maybe it's just me. I mean, what
I
about,
think there's some personal interaction.
So the work session though, are we discussing budget again on Friday?
it's on, we have an agenda item on there.
Okay.
Yep.
I would rather have it here.
hey, you still got some questions on the budget?
Not at this time. Not at this time.
But if you sit down and go through it, I bet.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Today was a good beginning.
Today was a good beginning. I'm not ready to say, yeah, this is good.
No, no.
Bring it to us Friday.
It's still work in progress.
Yeah, we'll work on it. I think the main item that we will need to look at will be the PD stuff with the officers and the evidence tech. And I want to bring a couple different options back to you. So yeah, we would try to do that between now and then.
Yeah, this, for example, I don't want to spend $55,000 on a street sweeper as of right now.
Correct.
I'm just saying, so these are some things, I'm just saying is, my sentiment right now is if it's a street sweeper and officer, give somebody a broom. You know, I'm just saying this right now because that's where I'm at right now. So I'm just saying, I know there's a lot more to it now.
Yes.
But that's just my.
And that's what I need you all to come back to us on Friday and tell us what your concerns are with the information that's been presented to you so that we can make adjustments. Because if we need to, we're going to need to balance the budget regardless, and we will, but there's going to be different variations and options. And if we don't want a street sweeper here, which I think we've delayed that.
It's going on a lease payment, so we wouldn't purchase it outright.
I was just using that as
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
So my question, are we meeting here or meeting Zoom? I like this.
We're meeting here.
Yes, we're going to meet here on Friday if you want.
Okay. All right.
We will do audio only because we don't have the capabilities of all being Zoomed.
Well, that's what we were doing today, right?
Correct, and we still are right
I don't think they really
now.
care if they see our face.
I think you're selling yourself short, Mr. Mayor.
Maybe 40 years ago, yeah.
So yeah, so we'll move forward. We'll have our workshop here on Friday, same exact format. And at the end of the workshop, we have budget on that agenda regardless.
And I mean, your face is already on there, so you're the younger one, you're the baby. So.
Yeah.
We need to recess this to Friday.
No.
We've already got it. No, we can adjourn our budget meeting today. Yep.
Well, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second? All in favor, say aye. I ain't even hearing everybody now.
Chairman, thank you for the coffee.